Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this crisp and bright full moon day in February. And welcome to the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting, basically a budget meeting today. I see we have a couple of folks in the gallery, so I'm going to go through the drill. We have exits should there be any emergency on the side, as well as out the door on the side yard there, as well as the front door where you came in. Should there be any emergency, our muster point is on the sidewalk out front or the parking lot out front. And also if you need to use the washrooms, they're just down the hall on your right. And they're two automatic doors, so it's a bit tricky. Just follow the directions and they'll let you in and lock you in and let you out. Okay, so I don't see anything else today except, yeah, everybody's in their places with bright shining faces. We've got quite a meeting scheduled for you today, a lot of facts and figures. And you get a little insight into the siloed world of electoral areas where everything has its own service, its own administration, its own legal, its own budget, its own borrowing, etc., etc., etc. I'm going to start off, of course, by acknowledging the fact we are so privileged to be here on the traditional unceded territories of our Comox First Nation peoples. And without any further ado, we're going to get into the financial plan. So I think it says staff will provide a brief summary, doesn't say brief, but I'm going to say brief, of public input received regarding the 2025-2029 five-year financial plan. So I guess we turn it over to the CEO for introductions.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, good morning to the committee members. Yes, Lucy Bacharek will provide that brief summary. You're right, we do have a full schedule today, and we have a hard stop time of, I believe, 2 p.m. today. So so we have a lot to cover, and thank the directors for diving in. Lucy, that brief summary of the public input.
Thank you. Yeah, same time, please feel free to just put the PowerPoint up as well. And as we're saying, we got a lot to get through today, so we'll try to keep moving as quickly as we can. And for the first item, and starting with the public engagement, yes, very brief. I won't repeat what I've brought to the table yesterday. We have no new submissions to our Engage website, so there's still the 4 questions out there. One still remaining to be addressed. Right? So that's all I have for you from a public engagement perspective. I'm just going to get the clickers here.
Splendid. So I guess we can plow right into our first item of business, the financial plan.
Chair.
Sorry.
We do have the follow-up items for you. So if can we go through those?
Fire away on the follow-up.
Yes, that would be great. Okay, thank you very much. So just so you have an idea of this from an agenda perspective, we did the public input. We have these items of 5 items of follow-up for you that we tracked from your last meeting that we would like to address those first. And just of note there for item 3 and item 4 for 619 and 620 that we would like to bring those back on the 24th. So we don't have all the info ready on those, but we have the info ready on the other 3. So if we can go through those first and then get back into our budget items to continue where we left off and move to the item number 2 on our agenda. Okay. So first up, we have 340, and Mark Rutten is going to speak to this one.
Move the second on receipt and over to Mark Rutten.
Thank you, through the CEO and through the chair. So at Monday's meeting, we presented the 340 liquid waste management planning budget, and we got some feedback from the directors. And what we heard, or what we think we heard, was some looking to better understand the costs associated with each project. So the budget is presented in the normal fashion for CBRD budgets, but doesn't really do a great job of kind of seeing, you know, where's the focus, where's the money being spent, how's it allocated to projects, including some feedback on how's staff time allocated, and then also asking staff to look for efficiency. So we put together a table.
Sorry.
If you go to the next slide, please, Lisa. Yeah, so I put together a table here with Kelly's help to just break the budget down in a totally different way. So this is not something that you normally get, but thought it might be helpful for this discussion. So what it does is it lists kind of the key initiatives on the left-hand side there. So South Sewer, which we talked about, South Sewer project, the septic education and maintenance, rainwater management, and then there's other initiatives, and not all of the initiatives that this particular service works on with its 2 employees are listed here, but some of them we've put in here, like watershed stewardship, planning referrals, and then there are other items. And then along the top, I've listed some of the main budget categories. And then for the minor categories, I've kind of lumped them together as a column called other at the end. So what this shows is that most of the focus, a very high percentage of it, is on the South Sewer project. And the way that that's funded is, or the way those costs are kind of allocated, I should say, is professional fees. So those are the fees that we are paying to engineering companies, basically in this case, to produce more detailed engineering for that project. So this work has not been awarded. It's not happening right now, but it's what we're proposing in the budget. And then we've assigned legal costs to that project, public outreach. So just these are just to cover an engagement session, like renting the hall and putting together some posters for the public engagement. We also have committed to fund some Comox First Nation resources for the work that they need to do on this project, integrating their own servicing needs with the South Sewer project. And then some of our staff salaries and wages, because this project is taking up such a large amount of time and resource. This is a bit arbitrary on my part, but I've tried to show, you know, this is where staff is going to spend a lot of their time. And then so on for the septic education program. So you can see that we've really scaled back in 2025, planning to spend 2,000 on just education, and then allocated some of our staff time towards that item, but you can see it's much smaller. Rainwater management, and then the other category, which, you know, covers watershed stewardship and planning referrals, but also many other kind of liquid waste management planning items that come up in the rural areas from time to time. So there it is, kind of broken down in a different way. Hopefully this is helpful. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
That looks great, Mark. You have some questions, Director Arbor?
Yeah, thanks. That is helpful, and thanks for bringing it back. I guess yeah, it is helpful, and I'm surprised by how low the septic education and maintenance project. So does that include the feasibility for a potential service, or that would come out of feasibility dollars for that aspect, or?
So on there's kind of 2 actions that we have on septic education and maintenance. So one is based on the strong feedback that we had from the public. We're planning to just continue with the education program. So continue to provide, you know, the best practices for septic system maintenance. And then to, within the liquid waste management plan, to focus on, you know, do we want to include more within the plan in terms of actually enforcing pump outs and mandatory maintenance.
And that would just,
but we have stepped back from mandatory maintenance across the whole service.
right. So it's focusing back on potentially Union Bay and Royston,
Yeah.
which I've mentioned at public meetings that I don't think I'll be super supportive of that. But in terms of the, I mean, the South Sewer is so grant dependent and timely. So at what point can we bring down that service to a low level? Because in the 5-year financial plan, it kind of shows stable continuation of funding into that service. But surely at some point, South Sewer will be a going concern on its own right. as a service, maybe by 2027, 2028. So it might be good because I think when what I feel our comments as directors last time is that, as Dr. Greaves said, it feels like that service has been at the same level for like 16 years. And, South Sewer makes sense. It's a time-defined thing, but as it peels off, are you saying that that service could go down to 180,000 a year if we kept everything that's currently there? Because it's currently at 450, right?
Yeah, well, no, I'm not saying that. Yeah, it is tempting to, if we remove that first line, what does the budget look
Yeah.
like? It's really, right now, our priority for the past several years has been South Sewer.
Yeah.
And because this is a small service with only 2 employees,
Yeah.
we've, 80, 90% of their time has been allocated towards that project. But it doesn't mean, I suppose it means the service could be reduced, but what I would say is that there's a lot of other work for this service to do. So there is work in Area C that hasn't progressed in terms of rainwater management. You can see we've allocated some resources there for this year, but there's a lot of work to do on actually taking the study work that we've done and turning it into something more real in terms of implementation. And yeah, it's really a shifting of those resources to other initiatives, which have kind of, been on the back burner since there's been so much energy put into South Sewer. So that's really what it looks like is reallocating, and determining what the next highest priorities are. But for 2025, this is the snapshot.
Okay, well, I might be, we'll see what Dr. Hardy and Greaves say, but I don't see a ton of savings to be realized for this year, and maybe there's further conversation to be had next year. The Watershed Stewardship Initiative will get a report. Well, it's been sitting for KFN feedback for a number of months, and now apparently we're getting that feedback. So we'll see that report pretty soon, and then we'll decide whether to, create a service out of it or not. And for rainwater management, I guess I'll try to educate myself more about the what's maybe being tried in Area C. But yeah, for South Sewer. So it's just for me, I was a bit like Dr. Grieve. I just saw like that steady 450 forever and ever. And it's like, what are we achieving? And I think we both had the same comments, right? So maybe revisit next year would be how I would frame it for today.
Thank you, Director. Dr. Hardy, anything to add on this? Thumbs up. When you look at the over $2 million for the Sewer South extension, most of it's, like you say, is engineering. And if you take it back to the previous failed referendum on a South Sewer, there would be blew through another few $1 million. All that stuff is valuable moving forward anyway, isn't it? It's all evidence-based engineering. Although we had to modify it because we had an actual treatment plant on the works first time around. But all that stuff isn't really going to waste. It's not like it's going to be obsolete because the basic lay of the land, what the flows will be basically and all that kind of stuff. So even though the project itself may be delayed or the scope changed in the future, what I'm saying is it's not wasted money. Correct.
Yeah, we have had to pivot on this project several times. It's not efficient to pivot. So, it does cost money and and like I said, it's not efficient, but where we can, we are definitely trying to, for the engineering that we do, especially when we get into the layout of the collection systems and the more detailed design of those, that is transferable to the future.
The collection system for sure. Yeah.
For sure. And like you said, we've pivoted on treatment, on sending the water to the Comox Valley Sewer Service. And, that has not been an efficient process, but for the most part, these engineering charges are transferable to future parts of the project.
So it's just basically a bump in the budget that will eventually be transferred, I guess, to the Sewer Commission. Is that correct? Or some of it? Not on the building, just once it's operational.
Yeah, there's gonna be kind of two components
Oh, so
to
it'll be its own
this in the
service, but it'll be
future, so.
under contract.
Yeah, there will be core Comox Valley sewer system components like the force main that extends ultimately all the way from Union Bay to the Courtney Pump Station. That's going to be regionally owned infrastructure along with any pump stations that are regional. And then the collection systems, there'll be a local service area eventually established for those.
Yeah.
So, you know, eventually South Sewer won't show up in this budget at all anymore. And, you know, we'll be back to focusing on
The Northlands.
North Sewer maybe, or, you know, whatever.
The North wants in.
The North wants in, yeah. So whatever new initiatives or continuing initiatives come along.
That's great. Okay, so any further discussion on receipt? Seeing none, call the question. Anybody opposed? Do we not move it?
No.
Oh, the recommendation, sorry. Yeah. On the recommendation, any further discussion on that? I don't see any. Call the question on that. Anybody opposed? That carries.
Thank you. The next one we had for you was on service 500 for planning, and Kelly here will speak to this one.
Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you, through the chair. Service 500, we also had a problem with the presentation on Monday, and Robin and Ton and Alana are here to go through that presentation if you'd like. But coming out of that meeting, the proposed requisition was at $2,620,000, which is a $320,000 increase over 2024. And we were asked to look at options to try and bring that requisition down. We have two options for you. The first option is that we have gone through and looked at their surplus and their reserve figures for 2024. And we think that we can bring in an additional $320,000 from their future expenditure reserve. They have quite a healthy reserve. And we can use that towards rate stabilization, and that would allow us to reduce the requisition to the 2024 level of $2,300,000, which would provide a savings of approximately $24 per residential property valued at $865,000, or about $2.97 per $100,000. Option two is to keep the requisition at the 2025 proposed amount of $2,620,000. Just into the recommendation that we bring in the additional $320,000 from the future expenditure reserve to reduce that amount for the requisition.
What do you think, directors? Director Arbor.
Thank to staff. I guess the third option that's not presented is to reduce scope. And clearly planning doesn't want to reduce scope. Because bringing down the reserve is I guess a temporary patch up. And I guess my question is this a patch up that would catch up over time if we start moving reserve and all of a sudden, instead of looking at a 10% increase, you'll be back in 2 years asking for a 20% increase. So I'm just wondering if there's any consideration to scope.
Madam O'Lally?
Good morning, through the chair to the directors. We can certainly reduce scope. This is one of those services that is really driven by projects. And so the other thing that's proposed for 2025 is the hiring of an agricultural coordinator in order to implement our agricultural plan. So that would be an area that you could look at, but our caution there would be that we would not then be able to undertake the work of implementing that plan without that resource. So yeah, we can dive in to the scope and look at the projects and have a discussion with you about what you would like to take out, what you'd like to remove, and see where we could find you savings. Our recommendation, though, I would turn it to Kelly and Lucy just to kind of speak to the health and sustainability of that reserve and that it is a healthy reserve, as Kelly has noted. We've used it for this kind of eventuality in the past. And I don't know if you can comment, Lucy or Kelly, specifically on the question around what next year would look like.
Just a couple more thoughts on that, and I'm sure as directors are getting, we're trying to not have this heavy reliance on surplus, because exactly as you have said, Director Arbor, that's what ends up happening to the future. It's a temporary fix. It's one-time funding. It's why it's not something that's recommended from a best practice perspective, and then you'll be back at a place where you need to be catching up. So this is why, as we're going through these services and we're really carefully looking at, okay, so is there some savings from the year before? What is the state of that reserve? And this is one of those places where we do feel there is a healthy reserve. So you can take the tax pressure off on a short-term basis. Going to the future, of course, we still have to be considering the breadth of that service, the level of activity, and all the various projects and work that is required or the board wants to occur in that service.
Can I have a follow-up, Chair? Yeah, so that made sense to me. So basically, we're in cautious mode right now around budgets overall. And since it's a healthy reserve, I'll be okay with the recommendation because we'll lower it. But just, in a couple of years from now, depending on the situation we're in, we might ask planning for a scope revision so that we don't end up, depleting the reserves and all of a sudden facing a huge increase. And I'd be curious over the next year to see where efficiencies can be created. And we've had some discussions around building inspections and all the rest of that. I'd be curious to see where that could happen. I think nobody ever wants to see, including me in my other role as a staff, like we never want to see. Well, it could be, we could have scope reduction there, but I think it's also good in the context we're in for next year, so that we avoid that situation of a huge increase later. Can I have a bit of latitude to ask a question on a related topic, semi-related?
It's gonna cost you.
It's gonna cost me. Okay, I'll put money in. Thank you, Chair. Alana, I didn't get the opportunity because I had just a distraction during the last meeting on RGS. And I'm just wondering if you could explain, because I don't think any directors asked questions, but there was an 80K for settlement expansion something. Can you provide a bit more detail on that? Because in the context of Royston and all that, that's important information for me. And I meant to ask it, but I didn't have that budget.
Through the chair to the directors, that budget, we've changed a lot in the last few years, where previously, you're right, there would be a lot of discussion and questions. So we provided a briefing note, just cast your mind back, and the project that Director Arbor speaks to is around a settlement expansion area review, not for the purpose of reviewing growth or boundaries necessarily, but rather looking at those settlement expansion areas relative to the municipal needs to grow into those areas in order to meet their housing targets. So we've started that work already, working with engineering staff, looking at our infrastructure capacity in those settlement expansion areas. And this next piece of work would be engaging a consultant to really drill into what kind of supply is needed by the municipalities, whether the timing on the incorporation of those settlement expansion areas needs to be a little bit advanced ahead of what we were previously anticipating. We're proposing $80,000. We haven't yet gone out to the marketplace. We do have some funds within the 500 service that represent a grant from the province to do implementation of the housing statute for electoral areas. So the electoral areas portion of that work could be paid for using the provincial grant.
Okay, I'm glad I asked then, and I would be supportive of that approach to get the areas, but then I would want to have us at this table have the opportunity to talk a little bit about the scope and direction too of that work, if that's possible. So thank you, Chair, and I'll be fine with the recommendation.
Nothing about us without us. Well, we do have in the housing needs report, like currently we're down 900, 900 houses, 900 homes, I think. We're down in the housing needs report in electoral areas. So, it's a lot of this is going to be driven by what comes next, and nobody has a crystal ball. At this point, you know, we might be dealing with a far different scenario in a year's time. So, and also, I guess, I mean, planning is driven by growth. So if there's less demand on that side and less consumer demand on housing, people are moving here less. Can't see that happening though. But if you actually look at the regional growth strategy, and I've said this before again and again, I mean, a lot of that evidence that he uses, the stats dated back, I think, to the 06 census, and you know, it was basically out of date by the time we developed the regional growth strategy. It was way over the map. We're looking at 120,000 people in the Comox Valley with the Union Bay Estates, the Cayette, you know, the Sage Hills. It was more and more and more. So I mean, we have a reality check called the economic meltdown in 2008. So, you know, a lot of this stuff should be actually looked at again, because I think the RGS was based on a lot of assumptions that, you know, I know we're not going to do a comprehensive review of the RGS, but anything that would, you know, refresh all the statistics would be sorely needed here. So, yeah, and hands off the agricultural planner. That's all I got to say. It's taken us over 20 years to get one, so we're going to keep that one in the budget. Director Hardy, add your sage wisdom. Let's go with that sage wisdom in itself. Okay. So on receipt, anybody opposed receipt? That carries. Recommendation attached. Okay, so to be clear, we're just bringing me 320 from reserves, right? And propping it up at this point. Okay. Anybody opposed to that? That carries. And on to the third unfinished business.
This was the last piece that we have for you this morning as follow-up, and it's about Service 621. And specifically about the Bear Creek Nature Park vehicular bridge is the item. So from a finance perspective, we have some data up here on the screen that's about switching up the type of funding that's associated, and also the implications of that. So we can go through that, and Doug and Mark, that there may be some additional information that's available specifically about the bridge. So I'll have Kelly go through these options here for you. Mark can add some further information as needed, and then we'll go from there. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thank you, Lucy. As Lucy said, we have three options for you. The first one being to remove the community works funding of $400,000 that is currently attached to the project in the proposed plan, and replace it with short-term debt. We don't have the reserves available in this function to be able to fund it through the reserves. Option two is to remove the project from the capital plan altogether and bring it back later when more information is available. And option three is to remain as, for the project to remain as what is layered into the proposed plan. The implications to the taxation resulting from option one is the short-term debt would come with servicing of approximately $110,000 per year, which would increase your overall requisition by about, your overall tax impact by about $9 for a residential property at $865,000. And option two, if we remove it from the capital plan, there's no savings to the 2025 operational budget as it was layered into the capital projects. So
the money was slated to come from the gas tax fund, the Canada Community Building.
It was.
From Area C.
Yes.
Okay, and we heard from Mark that it's in dire needs right now. Is that correct, Mark? I mean, you went out, actually, I haven't seen it. I've driven over that bridge many times, but I haven't seen it this year at all. So I'll let you talk.
Yeah, to the chair, some of those lock blocks have fallen off. So if you go down to have a look at the bridge, you can kind of see the lock blocks that are now in the river, in the Oyster River. We do have engineers down there that have assessed it, and we have had DFO down there to look at it as well. DFO knows that to them, that hatchery is a really important hatchery. So, my understanding is I would be very surprised if they didn't come forward with some funding for it.
Yeah,
So I think the way to move forward is to keep the money this year in the budget to do the planning and the design work and give us an options report that will give us options on how to move forward and costs of each of those options. And we can bring that back to the AASC for decision on how you want to move forward with the project and how you want to fund it. And that'll also give us time to then speak with DFO, with ORs, et cetera, to figure out funding strategy to go along with that.
yeah, we know that nothing that's in anywhere near a water course or a sensitive salmon bearing stream is cheap. So it might be interesting if a DFO comes to the table. We heard that maybe DFO were tightening their purse strings as well. So maybe there's some kind of a fix that is good for 10 years or whatever. Because I mean, obviously it's an extremely important hatchery. I mean, it punches way above its weight, and it's all volunteer driven. And of course, a lot of the volunteers come from Area C and Area D north. So, okay, well, say goodbye to the gas tax. I guess I'm good with it. Pardon? No, I think we'll just go with it as was originally presented.
With gas tax. So option 3, just leave it as we have it in your proposed.
Remain as proposed.
And propose the projects there.
Otherwise, it'll come back to get us anyway, right? So
And
we will deal with it up front.
we certainly will still do, sorry, if I can just add, a due diligence around if there's additional funding that's going to come from an outside group, then clearly we'll bring that in. And that'll just save some of those community works funds for something else later on. But if we leave it as is, the project is there, you're comfortable with the project, we'll continue to progress. And we'll absolutely look for other areas where we can bring in other funding.
I'm sure the good people of Area C would be only too happy to support the Oyster River salmon enhancement. So, okay. So that's, anybody else want to comment on this? Looks okay on receipt. Anybody opposed? And going with option,
Just
Yeah.
want to be clear on what the resolution would be that the
Okay.
committee is going to support, and
yeah. So
Unless if you want me just to, would you like me just to say the original? It
Yeah.
would just be that the proposed 2025 to 2029 financial plan for the Service 621, I won't say its whole name, be approved
we'll support the recommendation as remembered.
as the original recommendation. So it's status quo. Okay, good. We're good.
That's all right.
So you've moved it?
Yeah,
then?
I'll move it.
Okay, I'll second it.
can I ask a question
Yeah.
just for clarity?
Yes.
To Lucy? Does the committee then also have to consider a second resolution to, that was not considered on Monday around the application of the community works funds to this particular project?
Thank you for that.
All right, that's a different. that's a
Second
different-
motion, but it would
Can we?
authorize
Yeah.
that funding? Okay, so after the one on the floor?
So I'm just wondering, because the motion was passed, I could move to rescind the resolution regarding the community works deallocation for this project. Would that satisfy?
That would be clear.
Well, I think the resolution that was passed on Monday was for the 3 projects.
Yeah.
Orr Road Bridge, Spike Park, and Jackson Drive
Right.
Stewart. And you didn't consider the Bear Creek Nature Park at the time. So I think just a follow-up recommendation
Okay,
resolution. just for the
to
Bear
add
Creek.
the Bat Creek, motion to add the Bear Creek project to that list.
I'll second that.
After you consider the current recommendation on the floor to approve the proposed budget.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna start with the first recommendation that's been moved and I seconded. Anybody opposed to that? That carries.
And then I'll move to add the what's it called? Bear Creek Nature Park Bridge project to the list of community works funds.
Community works funds. And seconded?
Yep.
Any more discussion on that? Don't see none. So anybody opposed? I don't see any there as well, so it carries. Glad we got to the bottom of that. And now we're moving along to new business, correct? So we're on 2.
think we're moving straight into, on the agenda on your screen, it would be Service 615.
Okay.
And Doug will be introducing the Electoral Areas Grant, Electoral Areas Arts and Culture Grant. So Doug, over to you.
Thank you, and through the chair. Before I get started, I just wanted to mention 619 and 620, the park services coming back. And when we do come back, we will come back with a change in scope, change in services potential, or change in projects. So I apologize for taking a little bit longer, but there was many analysis we ran yesterday, and they all have impacts. So we hope to be back on the 25th with that. And today I'm here to present the Service 615 Arts and Culture Grant. This grant is an electoral area service and really provides some monies to help fund mostly the facilities within the municipalities as well as the Arts Council, as you'll see. Should also note in your package, there was a briefing note attached to this. Really focuses on 7 community groups and looks at the arts from developing a mural at the link that you may see when you drive by to partnerships such as the regeneration program at the Comox Valley Airport, and of course, major facilities hosting things like the Blue Circle series at Sid Williams Theatre. And of note, the Lasmosaurus was BC's provincial fossil named last year, and that was attended by Premier David Eby to announce that. So that's some of the things that happened. It's much the same. You have here grants to other services. You have a slight increase here. And we tend to see that every year as we review the financial submissions by each organization. Here's the organizations you primarily support with a small unallocated amount. I think it was last year we added the McLaughlin Garden Society, so they're once again, oh sorry, it's this year we're adding the McLaughlin Society, who used to be a rural kind of grant applicant. So we put them in this arts and culture grant because it's more in line with what they're doing. And then the unallocated amount remains available for other things that come up through the year. So year over year change, funding sources, projections. Yeah. Much the same as the last table. And here's the 5-year kind of future expenditure reserve. As we don't own any of the assets, there isn't a huge focus on this reserve, but we do put aside some money for contributing to any major programs or capital submissions that may come in for your consideration. Those are typically done through a delegation or otherwise. I just wanted to note here, as you see your strategic drivers here, one of the pieces of importance this year is, you may remember a few years ago, you helped finance some of the strategic cultural plan being done by the city of Courtenay. That's still in its final draft stages. One of the recommendations we foresee coming out of that draft is to advocate to the Comox Valley Regional District regarding regional funding to support future capital arts and culture projects that demonstrate regional impact. So you may recall this service was actually established from conversations regarding a regional impact. So they've added that into there, and our anticipation is we'll see a delegation or invite City of Courtenay staff in the future, being sometime in 2024, to discuss what this means and maybe relook at this approach in general, or at least start that discussion. So you're aware of that. And lastly, on that piece, the grants are also going to be undergoing a little bit of a agreement back in place, similar to what they had. So any grants over the $30,000 threshold, which we've done corporately, will be moving to a user agreement or some sort of agreement. So you'll likely see those for some of the larger facilities during their application processes. So those will also likely be coming through in 2025, early 2026. You know, there's a lot of changes in our granting program with finance, so we'll be prioritizing throughout the year on which changes in contract agreements we will be able to sign. So lastly, with that, the proposed budget's in front of you and for your consideration. If you have any questions, let me know.
Dr. Arbor had your light on.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I do struggle with this one because I think the last couple of years, the warmness to continue to support municipal centric, this table always talks about it. And it's culture and art, so we have to contribute some, but I do wonder when, like, I don't think we're very good at catching, and just because Hayek is here, just so you know, Hayek, Hornby Arts, sorry, I have a hard time with the change, but Hornby and Denman do not contribute to this service, so from a tax perspective, so it tends to be mostly the other communities I represent on this one. But last summer I had a really great young artist in Union Bay help with a new mural at the post office building in Union Bay, and in the grant allocation every year, I only tend to see municipal arts organizations, and I don't know how much outreach we do to the what I would call the micro arts groups that live in rural areas. So this is a budget that, and then I'll be interested in the regional conversation. I may not be super warm to it either if it's like if it goes to regional decision making or anything like that. I'm not sure that's what you said, but if that was the case, I would definitely show concern. So for this budget, I would tend to just leave it as like, what percentage increase is proposed on this one?
I think it was 7.22%.
7.2?
And a big portion of that is supporting the McLaughlin Gardens, which is strictly rural at 30, well, not a big portion, 3,500 of that is a new addition of
35.
McLaughlin.
Okay. Yeah, 7% is not horrible, but it's not, a few years ago, 7% was horrible.
Sorry to interrupt, Doug. I'm looking at slide 6 on the revenue and it's showing a 5.3%.
Oh, sorry, I'm
Increase.
looking at slide 5, so maybe we should confirm.
On the taxation increase. If that was the question, it's a 5.3% increase. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. So yeah, 5%. So I guess I don't necessarily want to rock the boat too much, but maybe for this year I would ask if we can find, because I don't know, like we don't have in the communities South, Royston, Union Bay, and Fannie Bay, we don't have a lot of formalized arts organization, right? So I think that's fair to say. And I'm just wondering if groups, unorganized groups or community events can access some of that funding. I guess they would have to find some type. So has it been your experience? Has there ever been demand from those communities for some of these funds or awareness?
I'm not sure the level of awareness. We have had inquiries from Union Bay in the past, and they ended up going under the heritage
Right.
kind of
that's right.
program.
Yeah.
Really, a couple of years ago, I do recall the Arts Council, the Community Arts Council,
They did something.
was in here and really had some programs
Yeah.
reaching out into the rural communities. So that's mainly been our conduit to spread the word about this grant and also to incorporate the rural communities and sometimes those, lack of better words, mom and pop kind of shops or artisan studios, I suppose is the proper word,
Yeah.
into having opportunities to display their works. So, the Arts Council has been another recent addition outside of the bricks and mortar approach, which this was originally set up for.
Yeah, no, that's thanks for that additional information. And yeah, maybe I need to do a better job to spread the word. Is it, sorry, before we go, no, I'll just leave it. I'll drop it. Go ahead, Director.
Director Hardy?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just if my math is correct with regards to the bump for Area A into this particular service, it's a 3.63 bump. So I know overall the big picture with this service is a 5.3 bump, but for Area A, it's a 3.63 bump. B, it's 25. Just kidding.
So if I may, I also note, there is an unallocated amount in this grant that you're also approving, so there's $5,000 there if you wish to spread the word yourselves a little further to your arts communities within your electoral areas. Those can be considered.
Well, coming from a background as a field rock star, I can safely say that I view this from a little bit of a different direction because you know, the real art world, I think, operates in that twilight zone. It doesn't really operate under the approved public arts and culture kind of a umbrella. I think you got a lot of people that, you know, that real, like I say, real artists tend to be a bit on the spectrum and a bit antisocial. Not all of them, I'm not generalizing, but a great deal of the activity in the art community is not necessarily sanctioned by government. In fact, as you probably know, there's tens of thousands of artists behind bars all over the world for not towing the public line. I think George Orwell said that all art is propaganda. But he also said that, but not all propaganda is art. So anyway, yeah, there is that whole segment that operates in the shadows on its own. So I don't think there's any capturing that. What we can do though is support places like the St. Williams Theatre and the museums, and that's what we're doing. So you know, otherwise you get kind of a sanitized government approved art form that has a very small lifespan and looks quite quaint and peculiar in 30 years time. Okay, well, what are we at? We're at receipt. No more discussion. Call the question. All in favor of receipt? See, gotcha. That goes. Move the recommendation. Recommendation moved and seconded. Any opposed? That carries. Thank you, Doug. And Doug's here for a reprise on the Service 670 Hornby Island Community Facilities.
Thank you. And through the chair, this is 670, your Hornby Island Community Facilities Service, which covers Hornby Arts Center, the community hall, among other facilities, including the, I guess, Natural History Museum is a proper term. Should note that the Hornby Island Arts Center is closer to completion, and the Natural History Center wanted me to extend their thank you for your support last year and continuing support potentially this year. Rentals on the Hornby Community Hall continue to project upwards. The community hall there is mainly based on a rentals type oversight program. They don't do a lot of programming specifically from this service. They rely on others to deliver that. Some of the trends we see, Art Center funding here with the operations. This is really about the operations side of business, and potential one-time exhibitions have other avenues to also apply for grants. Some accessibility upgrades are being planned in a number of the facilities, particularly the hall. And we're seeing a larger competition for venues of similar services within Hornby Island. And as always, the insurance rates continue to climb. The community hall insurance is now upwards of 22,000, where prior to COVID, I think it's at around under 6,000. So this is a theme you'll see throughout all the community hall presentations. It's challenging when you're running a small operation of $100,000 when this is 1/5 of your operating expenses or more. Human resources has changed, I guess. No, it hasn't changed. Still 0.01. So it's basically myself with some oversight, spending time with our community hall groups. Expenses, and here's a better chart for your expenses. So we looked at the proposed budget of being $20,000 for the Hornby Island Arts Center. Hornby Arts is here, and they'll speak a little later. Invite them to the table to talk about how well that has come along after some delays throughout the process and construction and other things. So a good news story coming at the end of this presentation. And then the operating grant for HIRA has gone up a fair bit, and that's largely due to increase in staff wages for oversight among, and then previously noted insurance. And there's accessibility programs still looking to get off the ground within that within the Hornby Island Community Hall. And then we have the Natural History Center now within the community hall service. So here's your projected budget up to 130,000. Much the same here. Your operating budget, most of this is grants to other organizations, 128,000 there. We have a reserve balance here. You know, arguably, I would say as the halls age, although the art center and the museum is relatively new, Hornby Hall is approaching, I can't remember, but it's getting old. Yeah, 55 years. So this reserve is manageable, but I think it would be better to see more contributions to the reserve here in the long run for additional big projects. This amount would not be able to even repair the entire of the roof if something happened there. So at this time, I'll bring up Sheila Marcette, the Director of Hornby Arts, and Melissa Moore, the Executive Director of Hornby Arts, or Chair. You can join me at the table if you'd like, and we'll discuss this recommendation here. So really, the center has opened, and the original projection of the 20,000 was expecting a later opening date, so they have a soft opening in place. And just as a reminder, a couple of years ago, we spoke about the operational costs and the relationship to actual numbers on the ground, and then coming back to the board to discuss what the long-term viability and support looks like. We're hopeful that in 2025, we'll have a near full operation. So hopefully in the 2025 fall, we'll be able to do a further analysis with the executive director, Melissa, there, and report back for next budget on some real-time numbers on operating costs. And I think from this point, I'll hand it over to Sheila or Melissa to kind of outline their additional requests for support and also the carry forward of 17,500 last year that we set aside for operations. They're requesting some of the options in front of you for that. And I'm available to answer any questions after they've given a brief update on the whole. And
If I could ask you
Sheila?
ladies to press that little button on the microphone.
Thanks so much, Doug. Yes, my name is Sheila Morissette and I'm board chair for Hornby Arts, and I'm delighted to be here today. Thanks very much for allowing us to speak. We have a beautiful new facility that is nearing completion. There's about 2 months more interior finishing that needs to be done and stucco on the outside, but the building is already being used. We're already holding meetings there, and we're anticipating being able to open the doors fully to the public at the beginning of May this year. So it's a great facility. We have a new executive director. Her name is Melissa Moore, and I'm happy to introduce her as well.
Hi there, very happy to be here. Thanks so much for having us. Yeah, it's a delightful time for me to join Hornby Arts. I'm so impressed with the building work that's been done. It's taken so much stamina and resources and people working together. Am I okay?
Yeah.
For years and years. So for me, coming in at this really pivotal time is really exciting. I think I can really see, coming from my own context, how this state-of-the-art facility will be a really sort of important hub, nervous center, a kind of anchor for the community. I was very interested with your comments earlier because there's so many sort of a history of sort of countercultural artists on Hornby Island and all sorts of things going on and really interesting things. And there hasn't been this sort of anchor to bring everybody together in the same way. But just to say the operational funding is so important to us and so appreciated. It fits very much with an earlier slide, having the one stable source of funding really helps us attract other sources of funding from other levels. Obviously, there's been really successful fundraising for the actual building itself, but operations and really making a success of this launch. The support will be really felt there. There's been a lot of work going on behind the scenes, kind of invisible work. We're working on all of our policies, planning and the programming, making a strong organization. With some earlier sort of COVID era funding, the group had the foresight to get some really good consultants coming in that are really helping us to really look at our healthy finances and make long-term strategic plans. So again, I think we're at a moment of really good potential, but that support that's been outlined with sort of lights on and helping us run things is really appreciated. Yeah.
Maybe I could just say, you know, we have actually submitted bills of over $50,000 already just for heat, light, admin, and insurance. So our construction insurance really skyrocketed to $4,500 a month. We are just now coming off of that onto regular insurance, but those bills are definitely mounting up. So we would appreciate your support very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So for clarity, just as you know, this is a lot on the recommendation slide. So currently the budget for operations in 2025 was projected at 20,000. So the option here is to increase that to 35,000. Now that we know that they've had a soft opening and will be opening in May. So that'd be an additional 15,000. And the second part of the budget, referring to what Sheila referred to earlier with the costs from 2024. There is a carry forward amount, so this wouldn't be a direct increase to the budget, but it'd be a carry forward of 17,500. And you have two suggestions here. One is to carry forward 10,000 from last year to now cover those operation expenses related to 2024. The second is no funding from 2024, and then the third option you have is to carry forward that whole 17,500, and then that would be for the 2024 operations. Yeah, as Sheila indicated, I don't need to go through the details, but basically they did have $50,000 in fees and operational costs for 2024 submitted to us, which we could dive into further detail if you so wish, but.
Any questions, Director?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Doug, for the presentation. And it's interesting that, you know, I calculated 1% of Doug is probably like just an ear and maybe a little bit of chin, and that's how much time you're spending on this. So thank you for all your guidance on that, the staff, because I know you make a big difference to all the nonprofits you interact with in the areas, and HIAC and the HIRA are no exception. So I'll finish by Hornby Arts, and I would like to say that somehow the PowerPoint was under Hornby Community Hall service, like not on the PowerPoint, but on the service lines. And I guess we renamed it the Hornby Island Community Facilities service? Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I guess it didn't get changed. It's the inquest of coverage agent, you know,
Yeah,
in the budgets, it's all been changed. So that'll be changed for next year.
Yeah, that sounds good. And we keep referring it to HIAC, and I'm the most guilty of that, but it is Hornby Arts now. It's I'm sure on the island it's all changed, but
I use HIAC.
yeah.
It's okay.
I'll start with the Hornby All. I am actually quite concerned, and I when I read the report yesterday, Doug, you said it today. I think the lack of reserve replacement and growth is concerning for this facility. And it may not be another 20 years till they need, you know, some significant stuff because they've addressed the roof addressed. But I think that a declining reserve on a 50-year-old building is really not encouraging. So for the next financial plan, I realize that all that goes through HIRA, but if you can, in your next conversation with HIRA ahead of the 2026 budget, I think I would like to see more reserves being built for long-term renovations and replacements. Otherwise, we might end up at a bit of a place where some of the other halls are, i.e. Fanny Bay Hall and other things, right? So I think building that reserve is important. In regards to HIAC, huge achievement. Just last year, like I think Sheila and I talked, and you know, just how much work you've put in to try to get it to this point. There was points where I lost hope myself, you know, that this building with everything that was happening, and for that directors at this table, the history of CVRD and Hornby Arts is pretty unique because when I got elected in 2018, this was the first Community Works Fund contribution we made outside of our corporation to a nonprofit. And it was a battle for me, like working with Chair Wells and Russell at the time, and we hadn't done it. And that 175, there was about 175 in the community, so we doubled it up, which I helped attract Ice-T. And then they doubled it up, and then Hornby Arts went to the feds, and all of a sudden we've got this amazing facility, and the perseverance of everyone at Hornby Arts has been amazing. So I do note that the $10,000 additional has turned into 15 in this one, because I think in the original report I was looking at, it was asking for an additional 10.
The 10,000 is to cover the 2024 operational costs. It's really based on just the utility portion, and that's the option from that standpoint.
Gotcha.
And the 15 is to get it back up to 35
For the 2025.
for the 2025.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, 35,000. Why did I have 30,000 in mind? Is there a reason? Is it my mind was glitching, or?
I don't know. I've got through a lot of community halls. Was it 30,000
Yeah.
in the? I can't. We'd have to go back and check.
Okay.
Maybe Kelly can check on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, George, I will note the PowerPoint that is on your website.
Yeah.
This one in front of us. Here.
Yeah.
The one on the website does, it has a change from what you see on the screen here.
So it was 30,000.
There's a recommendation there for the $30,000.
Okay,
So
so
that's
I'm not
probably
dreaming.
the difference here. And I think as Doug noted, there's some more recent information from the time that this PowerPoint that's online was first published.
Yeah. So it's
That's-
looking for an extra 15,000 really from the what was published. Or actually a bit more, because we would fund the full year. No, I agree. If and you know, if the facility is already open to the public and it's February, like we should consider it a full year. So I'm supportive of that recommendation. And then for the carry forward of 10,000 as well. It's just I don't love the last minute change from 30 to 35. So maybe I'd suggest that we do the 30 as published and then the additional 10. And hopefully, you know, I think it's a pretty high level of support. Like I'll give you an example. I think our contribution to I'll ask staff, our contribution to Union Bay Hall or Fanny Bay Hall, what is it currently? It's like,
It's below those numbers. I don't have the exact.
it's like 10,000 or
Yeah.
something. So this is actually a really, it's not compared to Hornby Hall. Hornby Hall and Black Creek are the two facilities that receive the most funding, but you'd be up there in comparison to the other facility. So I'd propose just a slight adjustment from 35 to 30 for option one, and then also option one with the 10,000 for the total of 17,500 available. As long as the staff in HIAC said it, we won't, you know, collapse your efforts with not having that additional 5.
Lucy wants to weigh in on this.
Not a weighing in. I just want to be clear on what the recommendation, what you want the recommendation to be. So for 2025 as their operating grant, that to bring that to $30,000. And then as we look at the carry forward amount that's there, and this 17,500 just relates to the approved operating grant that was there in the budget for 2024, that for us to pay that out to a level of $10,000. Is that what I heard? 10,000. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. The amount was 17,500 in 2024.
Up on the board. I thought 10,000 was the top amount. So I'm actually in favor of number 3, that Hayek received a 17,570. So thank you. Usually option 1 is the most expensive option in most of our reports. So
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't catch that. So yeah, so for the first one, 30,000, and for the second, 17,500.
Okay, yes, and I understand why the confusion's there, because there is a
There's a lot on the
$10,000
board.
figure in your
Yeah.
PowerPoint that's out in the that's related to this year's grant, but anyways, I understand, but just so that we're clear on a finance side, what you want these two amounts to be.
Yeah.
Last year's and this year.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, you know, they talk about the art of the deal. Well, I think with all these nonprofits, more the art of the begging and the securing of grants, which is a whole different thing. I heard insurance come up, and it's such a big item now, and it's going to get worse. So, I mean, really, a lot of these grants that we get, you know, they are gobbled up pretty quick, just utilities and insurance. The rest of it, you're pretty well on your own, so. Oh, I just triggered another arborist.
Yeah, no, it is arborist actually, arborism in this case, because I would like, we'll have, I don't know if Doug Chinnery will come today, but you know, we'll have our fire services, and one really unique thing we're trying to work towards in the central area of Hornby is to basically do some wildfire smart kind of interventions in that whole central area. But I think over time, the goal is to both protect buildings better, but also to reduce risks and maybe reduce costs. However, there's only 2 categories at the province to reduce fire risk costs. One is, you know, once you get your shuttle conveyance, and that's about it, or you don't have it. But I'm hoping we can start some advocacy at the province for 3rd level for neighborhoods where you actively actually manage the wildfire risks, and I'm wondering if that could impact insurance over time. But that's for the fire budget. But that they are in a very dangerous location, so to speak, around wildfire risks. And with Doug Chinnery, we're talking about same with the hall, the school, and so it's just the embryonic start to look at Hornby as a bit of a trial area for the Comox Valley Regional District to try to see how we can, you know, plan for the future and reduce risk. So.
And I'm sorry, Chair Grieve, I just had one. I forgot one element. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned as well, the other piece that we have not addressed is the additional funds for 2025 and that the funding source for that. So we will increase taxation by an additional $10,000 in order to go from a $20,000. We have a $20,000 grant already layered in the 2025 proposed. We are going to go to 30,000, an extra $10,000.
Sorry, I thought
Coming from taxation.
the original recommendation was 35, the 15,000. Or did you drop it to 30 again? Sorry, you did drop it to 30 again. Thank you.
Can I just confirm your grant for 2025 is $30,000?
Go ahead.
So because there's so many moving numbers, would it be helpful to bring it back to the 25th and then to give direction to staff to bring this and then confirm the taxation? Because
we can also just bring it back to you if you want to
Later in the
schedule it
day.
to the end of the day. We'll
End
bring
of the day,
a updated recommendation to put in front of you. If that's okay?
that
That'd
would,
be perfect.
yeah,
We
I
don't
think
need
I
to
think
the
that would be great.
24th.
That we will have full clarity.
Okay.
Yeah. But the intent is option 1 and option at the top and option 3 at the bottom. Option 1 being adjusted to 30,000. Option 3 remains the same. So.
Okay, I heard you right. 30,000 and 10. Okay, thanks.
Just again to clarify, Lucy, I heard $30,000 for 2025 in operating and the full 17,500 carry forward from 2024. So we will craft that wording. No, we'll craft that wording and we'll bring it back to you at a time throughout today just to get that formality. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, folks. Excuse you from the table and we'll take a vote on receipt. Anybody opposed to receipt? That carries. and recommendation attached? Or we're gonna bring it back for recommendation, okay. So that'll be later in the day, is that what I heard? Before 2. Well, moving right along, we still have Doug DeMarzo, and we have service 672, which is the Bainstown Community Facility Support Service for receipt. Move a second on receipt, and over to Doug.
Thank you. This is a relatively new service, a few years old. It supports the Bainstown community facilities down mostly in Area A with the exception of Hornby and Denman Island. Excuse me. Last year, we had a fairly significant accomplishment with the purchase of the Senior Bay Family Hall. So that was an amazing feat that this service was able to provide, which might have been difficult if we didn't already have this service in place. And the Fanny Bay Community Hall had received a $30,000 contribution, as well as it should be noted that the Union Bay Hall continued to progress their playground. We're definitely at a stage of old buildings. You saw a delegation from the Fanny Bay Community Hall that looked at the foundation, and this does not include the $110,000 in this budget for those repairs, but instead we're looking at condition assessments to be completed more thoroughly of getting under there and understanding exactly the issues at that hall. And I would argue that most of the other halls are also of that age, and they all have various condition assessments done on them. So when those are all completed, we'll have a better understanding. But in particular, at glance, they do seem to be aging well and have been relatively well maintained, with the exception of this repair that's needed for Fanny Bay. So again, you see the human resources there, not a lot. You see the kind of grants to other organizations, again, being the main driver of this hall. Go into that a little bit more on why that increase is there. So that includes the halls here being listed. Of significance there is obviously a new line item for that structural assessment, which you'll see the 100% increase being from 0, so an additional $15,000 projected for this year. And then most of them are relatively the same. We don't have anything unallocated in this budget. And the OAP hall has $6,000 set aside, which we haven't confirmed any capital projects for that. So that's a potential carry forward, as we now own that hall. So they're now under our MIA insurance. So they used to use that $6,000 to help pay their insurance. So that's a potential future revenue source or carry forward into future expenditures if need be. Here's the breakdown. Moving forward, sitting pretty stable. We're seeing it continue at $80,000. We feel it'd be a good requisition moving forward in the future, but that's where we're at here. Your reserves, again, this is a fairly new service, so slowly building them up. Part of that $80,000 being appropriate at this stage anyway, with more discussion, I'm sure, on it, is to help fund some of the reserve contributions. And most of these halls are run on volunteers and various boards in various states at various times in the year, but they all do and have continued to do great outreach to the community and keep these halls maintained and running for events as well as programming. Obviously, there's been lots of discussion around pickleball, and I think all the halls, with the exception of maybe Royston, all are now hosting quite extensive pickleball programs in the afternoon. And that's kind of a new revenue opportunity for them, as well as getting more day use in their halls. A couple of them also are homes to daycares. So there's a lot going on in all the halls, and they're managing to keep running under their volunteer boards. With that, I'll leave you with any questions you may have.
Any questions, Director?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. And I would go a step further than Doug in saying these halls provide the core recreation and cultural activity centers for those communities. And, you know, when I look at the 700,000 a year that Area A sends over to the swimming pool and the arena, and I look at the 80,000 for 5 halls, like, I think there's definitely way more value in the halls than regional facilities that are quite far away. And you can tell they are all, you know, operating at the brim. They have huge programs of activity and always busy. Some of them do weddings. It's like, it's all in one for those communities and right next door to where people live, right? And so I'm so glad we started that service around Bainstown community. But when I look at 5 halls that we support with 80,000 in Area A, and Hornby all alone gets 80,000, you know, I don't think that our service is anticipating future needs or very well. And so when I look at a flat requisition, this is actually the one service that I would, in the 5-year financial plan, look to escalate as those facilities complete their asset management plans. And Doug talked about the volunteers, and I talked to some of the volunteers, so the president of those halls, and they're feeling a bit burnt out at times. You know, they're putting a lot of hours. The hall in Hornby has an administrative person, I think about 20,000 a year or something like that, to help manage the whole thing. Same in Black Creek. So I think we're currently letting them choke a little bit in terms of the resources we're providing compared to the needs and the value that they provide to the community. So I would actually like to see a real escalation of the plan. And part of my plan is to start repatriating the dollars that we send to regional facilities and reinvesting them in the South, where people are actually living and doing activities together. So just, I'm okay for this year because I think Doug detailed really well the immediate need, like the structural assessment at Fannie Bay Hall and things like that. But over time, 5 halls, if they were all funded at the Hornby or Denman level, you know, that requisition would be closer to 300K a year. So I would like to see a financial plan that takes into account the future needs of those halls as well. Thanks.
5 halls in Area A? Oh, the Bainstown. Yeah. Well, my question is, when you hear of these halls, if the ownership was actually the CVRD, that their insurance goes down considerably because we can insure them under the Municipal Insurance Association. Do we have any idea what the advantage is? And I know we've explored before whether or not we could get the neighborhood halls under that, but we can't because we don't own the asset, right? And of course, they're very fiercely independent and possessive of the halls, which is understandable. But I'm just wondering, I mean, as insurance costs balloon, we already know businesses and homeowners and farms that don't have insurance anymore. So, you know, it's a tough one.
If there's a question in there, it would be a significant savings if they're under the ownership of the CVRD for insurance alone, I think, based on what we've discussed with them at ABC. But that's CVRD owned house, which is a much different model than we're currently running here.
Well, it's a whole can of worms once you get the CVRD involved. Director.
I didn't really know that. I think it'd be good to make that information, like sharing it with do we still get the halls together like once a year or something like that for?
Yeah, we still host meetings.
Because I hear from insurance about everybody. And to be honest, I think not all the volunteer hall board members are thrilled about being in charge of those facilities. They love the programming. They love to put on stuff for the residents, but the ownership, I would actually be totally open to exploring that. If it lowered insurance, and then I think we would get more serious about asset management as well, which is really intimidating when you're a volunteer group to start thinking about all these huge costs. Union Bay has done really well, but it's not everybody that's the same, right? So yeah, let's just put a note that, you know, personally, I'm like Director Grieve, I would be open to at least investigating the options of keeping the same for the long term versus potentially coming under CVRD.
Well, you mentioned burnout, and that's very real. You know, there's been some real champions of these halls that have taken it to their grave, basically. And then everybody goes, well, what did Joe do? Well, Joe, we don't know. Well, we know Joe did this, but, you know, we don't even know where the bank accounts are. Where are the bank accounts? You know, so we do have a couple of halls, like you said, extremely professionally run. And then some of the other ones, more like my napkin computation of the water voting that I did yesterday.
Just,
Yes.
I just have
Lucy.
one, just a couple of comments, and I really appreciate the feedback coming in, and we will take that all into consideration as we go to the next round of funding. So this in the last year was the first time that I did the island tour. So, you know, hearing from the groups firsthand about their challenges, which you've all mentioned here, and my comments were along a bit of the same lines. And Doug, I think for a number of years you've been highlighting that risk out there of the facilities and their aging and what they're going to need to the future, which is, you know, and from without the full detail at the moment, it's a fair bit of dollars that likely are going to be coming forward, and it's how are we going to manage that within these services, and you know, whether it's this service or the others, being able to gradually increase money. And I totally agree with the value that the local community halls bring. They're really important to the community. But I do think about the service model and just giving some thought to that, and whether there's a different way. And you've mentioned those, right? Is it the ownership of the facilities, how we support what's needed from their administration function, and is there a different way? We had conversations and did some brainstorming around ideas around that as we did do the tours through the island. So we'll come back, and I just appreciate the thoughts on, you know, maybe taking a step back on how this service actually is delivered out to the community, and is there a better way maybe to do that saves us some dollars, makes it more affordable as we go forward, or it helps us to find a way to make it affordable going forward.
So if I may, Chair, maybe I'd like to move the proposed financial plan, but I've never done that before, but to update, just as a show of intent, to update the 5-year financial plan to show a 15% increase each year through the 5-year financial plan. Because I think the longer we wait, the more the shocking reality of some of those lack of reserves is going to be. And I think that'll show to the community as well where we're trying to go.
Just for clarity then, is Director, would you be moving the proposed budget with changes to requisition to the tune of 15% in years 2, 3, 4, 5? That's something we can capture in a motion today and be able to proceed. Yeah.
Okay, so we have something on the screen we can put up there about future increases to cover capital replacement. Mostly for capital, I guess, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, there you are.
Okay, sorry, so, you know, for sure, and I appreciate this, and this is great. I think it addresses a known risk that we know out there, right? So we'll start to raise these requisitions going forward. And because this is, for the most part, they're managed by the community groups, it ends up still being grants going out the door to the community groups. Okay, unless the ownership changes, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I don't think there's any comparatives out there for some kind of hybrid model. I don't think it even exists. I don't even think it's even feasible. You know, you either own the facility or you don't. If there was a partnership or some kind of a third party, you know, would it work? I'm not sure, but I think the cleanest way to do it is to just increase our our reserves going forward. Does that look good? Okay. You're not going to get any opposition from me. I totally appreciate my community halls, and I think we had Island Health, it was VHA at the time, had an actual day at Creekside Commons where we discussed the benefits of community halls for communities, mental health, well-being, and what the future would look like, you know, when you talk about daycares and things. So, okay, so do we get a seconder? Second? Okay, so we got receipt out of the way, didn't we? Or did we? I don't know if we did. We can continue? Okay. The boss says we can go ahead with the vote. Anyone opposed? That carries. And then we zip back across the water to Denman Island. Over to Doug again.
All right, thank you. Through the chair, we're here to speak to Service 675, Denman Island Community Facilities Service. This is really about providing support to those halls, the Denman Community Hall and largely the museum, which also has a community hall portion to it. So here you see in the past, well, over the past couple of years, you've actually supported the outdoor structure. And last year again, you helped them finish some of the concrete work by additional 20,000. So that structure is looking pretty good and being used by the community to either host bands or some sort of sports or whatever the communities desire to use it as. At the community hall, there was a lot of the funding was towards sound and lighting improvements. And at MSDS, the Museum Society, the gym refurbishment is particularly a mural in that gym. If you're ever going by, you might want to stop by and check out. So I'll speak to this a little bit more in the recommendations, but MSDS was really looking at washroom accessibility. And as they move forward in their plan, they come to realize it costs a little bit more money than they originally had intended. So that's one of the main challenges with the budget this year is understanding that funding switch. And they were also one of the recipients of a building condition assessment they're all just being final drafted. I should just note, we've talked about it a bit in the last presentation of Bankstown, but all halls had the option of using that funding you provided last year for building condition assessments if they so choose. So those are just wrapping up and coming to help inform the next conversations that we alluded to a little earlier. Again, your FTE there, again, mostly grants out. Seen a slight decrease here as some of those funding for the outdoor facilities are no longer in place. I guess substantial decrease of 25%. And here's a breakdown of where most of that funding goes. It's a little bit of between capital repairs and then just general operating grant. It should be noted that often capital grants are carried forward is we no longer, I guess it's been a while, this practice is they provide invoices to us and then we pay out on the works once they're completed. So that's why you'll see in future as well, you'll see this broken out more on the community hall expenses. Here's your funding sources going out there. Again, this was basically kept flat moving forward. And that's just more or less the direction we've spoke with in finance moving forward. That future expenditures, two major halls again in this service. Both, well, the Denman Community Hall is quite large, and then the MSDS Hall. So again, these are similar to other reserves you see in your other services. They're not significantly changing. So we do have a slight change to the recommendations here, and this is mainly due to MSDS of wanting to shift their allocations. So it's this over, I guess, 25 and 26, it would be the same cost, but it would be a move of financing contribution to 2025 for the washroom project, bringing it up $10,000 and then decreasing the 2026 capital contribution down to 15 instead of the previous 25 for the roof or other project yet to be determined. It turned out the roof is maybe in a little better shape than what they originally assumed based on the draft assessment. So they're reassessing that. So they're hoping to shift an additional $10,000 to 2025 for their capital projects to make it a total of 15 for the accessible washroom project.
Okay. Can I go ahead, Chair? So, yeah, on the Denman Hall, it's nice to see the reserve at least remaining stable, not growing, but stable. Not as bad as Hornby, but I think both Hornby and Denman, you're looking at 50 years old halls. So I'd be interested. I know we kind of, because of the discussion we just had, we kind of rely on the organizations to prepare the initial budgets and stuff, but I'd be interested to see what is best practice from an accounting perspective and financial planning perspective. When you know that asset replacement for the Denman Hall, for example, would be about probably at least a couple of million, and where we have $135,000 in reserve, and I imagine that best practice would be replacement at 80 years or something like that, or so, or yeah, I just asked a question. We just don't have the information. We don't have a basis for why the reserves are where they're at. It feels to me like the reserves are short-term reserves for maintenance and minor upgrades, but there is no component of the reserves that are put aside for long-term replacement. And that's where I'd like to get to in the next 5 years, is to get to a place where those facilities are treated like our own facilities at the CVRD. Because like Dr. Grief said, if they fall apart, we can't replace them. You're taking the heart of the community straight out of the community, right? So there's the one service where I'm like, yeah, actually it's fine to grow because it needs to grow. Otherwise, we're gonna have some cliffs down the road.
I think we saw that happen when the school district started closing all the rural schools. They cut the heart right out of the community. Take their kids away, kids waiting for the bus at 7:15 in the morning, crazy. Lucy?
Sorry, just maybe thinking a bit forward, and I may be a bit catching up with the service and how we manage our community halls throughout. So today's conversation really helps me if I come back to the purpose of this service, and I am, fully reading that it's here to be supporting them from an operational perspective. The whole model around capital was a place that I was a bit blurry on. To what extent do we support the capital facilities, and maybe as part of what we do going into our next round of financial planning is to just circle back into the purpose of this service as well, and just get really, really clear and defined around to what extent do we support from a funding perspective the capital asset as well. And secondly, and that's just me thinking out loud as we go to the next round, if we did last year have funding for assessments for each one of these facilities, and I don't recall, Doug, were the assessments are they at a place where they're almost complete, or just a bit wondering that time and place where we'll have this more awareness of what we're faced with.
Yeah, most of them are almost complete.
Okay.
So we'd probably, we'll get together with the community halls, determine path forward. Maybe it'll be the impetus for a summer or fall report back to this board or EASC, kind of capturing most of the conversation we've had today as well.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, are we ready to move the financial plan? Moved, seconded. Any discussion? Anybody opposed? That carries. Now on to the fabulous Northland. Lunch North Community Facility Support, function 676. Over to Doug.
Thank you. And through the chair, this is really about contributing to those operations of the Black Creek Community Centers and the other facilities in the northern region. It's a defined portion, as you may recall. Your human resources. For the most part, this has been fairly steady of granting grants from an operational perspective. We did look at the Merville outdoor entrance, granting them some money as well as some money to the Helby Hall in 2024. So that's where you see those decreases there, kind of outlined in this year-to-year over change in this table. And I guess it should be noted that Black Creek Hall has been probably pretty stable in their funding for maybe the last 4 years. I'm sure they asked for an increase, but we've kind of held them steady through conversation. So that's one thing to note, that they haven't received a lot of increases in the last bit as we brought these other halls on board and look to assist more with the capital funding. It's all through taxation, as well as there was a little bit of reserve withdrawals. Here's the projections moving forward. You're seeing a slight increase and then flattening off out towards the last years of the financial plan. Again, your grants to other organizations are the primary expenditures through the operating budget here. And again, your reserves here looking similar to the other ones we've just seen. Some of the great work the community does for the halls is obviously replicated in the Black Creek area and the Merville Hall and Helby Hall. They all really serve different functions to that community. And they also have some overlap, but I should also note the Dove Creek Hall is in this as well. So quite a few halls in the Puntledge North and really serve that community well. Particularly the Black Creek Hall is almost to that point where you call it a fully functioning kind of community center with many opportunities offered, including field space and now an outdoor covered shelter. It's really the hub of that community for health and vitality. Where, not to take anything from the other halls, but that Black Creek Hall sticks out, where Merville Hall also offers some of those opportunities and seems to also deal with the additional evening musical kind of programming and event kind of space, which is really great for that Puntledge North community to have a hall that focuses on that, where the other one focuses more on the community center perspective. So with that, if you have any questions.
They do it all on a shoestring budget. It would be nice if we do plan on engaging the halls sometime for some discussion, that we bring up maybe some more coordination between the halls. I know for a long time there's been talk about having the coordinator for Black Creek also handle Merville Hall, but because they're quite different in what they offer, and Merville has that wonderful floor and a much bigger performing space. But more cooperation would definitely be to avoid any overlap and to actually maximize their differences and how they can use the fields and what have you. So my question though was around the Oddfellows Hall, the Santa Hall. Are they still not answering their phones? Have we reached out to them at all in recent times and showed them what we're doing and what, because I know we reached out to them originally, and it's the phone rings somewhere down in Victoria.
Yeah, I think we've reached out to them a couple times, and don't remember his last year or the year before we did make contact with them and let them know we're available if they have any questions, and the service is here for support. And we've also mentioned it to a couple of citizens there that use the hall, like for example, the backcountry horsemen use that hall quite frequently to pass along that message. So I would say there's a lot of other demands on the other halls, and
Those farmers.
they're basically not indicating a need. So we haven't further pursued.
But people move on and die and what have you, so you know, it might be worth it to keep. Maybe I should call them because, you know, believe it or not, some people really don't trust government. Maybe I can give them a call. The other one was our little Dove Creek bunch. Another one where it's difficult to get a hold of anybody. They're holding steady at $5,000.
Yeah.
And again, they have quite a few programs there for tots and toddlers and whatever too, so.
Yeah, they've been really active actually attending our community hall conversations since I think we met with them a couple of years ago, Director Grieve. I think you really spawned that participation
Yeah.
and they forward our information quite readily when we ask for it. So they've been more succinct with that.
I think we plant the seed and ask these halls how they see the future, you know. I think this, you know, the Craig Freemans of the world aren't gonna be around forever. So it's gonna be, you know, a different world in a few years. And we have to maybe focus minds on planning for however the future is gonna look with community halls. So anyway, so I do think, yeah, we need a reset with that. We need to engage everybody again. And wouldn't hurt maybe to take a look out at other jurisdictions, and if there is any, you know, I know I brought this up when I was in FCM and was talking to some, was Sturgeon, what was his name? I think you might have met him, Daniel, when you were in FCM from New Brunswick, crusty guy, something Sturgeon, his last name was Sturgeon. Anyway, he was talking about his community halls and how they fund it. So anyway, is there any other discussion on this one? Okay, so we're on receipt. I know we're on receipt on this one, so anybody opposed to receipt? That carries, and the recommendation. Move second recommendation. Any more discussion? Seeing none. Anyone opposed? That carries. Yeah, we're just at the 1 hour and 45-minute mark, so I'm gonna call a little recess, stretch your legs. We'll be back in 7 minutes, 8 minutes. 9.5 minutes. Do I hear 10?
The number that we have. I know. And especially because last one we were not finding any stuff that we have. Like I was just gonna hold on. And then like that. Yeah, I'll just shake it by. It's a big amount. It's definitely like because a few years ago when we did jumping ahead of everything else with a big yeah, no, you still feel it. He's still fighting. Maybe looking good. I think actually the only one there are now at 380 for the music part. And our bars are so it fails, but I think it's it's on the yeah. Otherwise, what do we do there? If it fails? Right away. We don't even wait a week, we announce it, let's go.
There used to be two community halls in area B, but they no longer exist. Oh, really? The Lazo Women's Institute Hall, which is on Knight Road. And then there was the Boy Scout Hall that was basically where the cannabis facility is now. 2-minute warning, Director. Zzz. That's what I said. With it's at the end. And wait for the tea to boil. That's okay. The kettle's on the boil. Okay, so we're gonna call the meeting back to order and we're on, right now, number 688, service 688, which is the Hornby Island Comfort Station local service area. We have a presentation on this, or?
I believe Mark Harrison will be introducing this PowerPoint for the Hornby Island Comfort Station local
Comfort
service.
Station, that's a relief. Okay, over to Mark.
Thank you. Through the chair to the directors, here to present Service 688, the Hornby Island Comfort Station Service. This provides support for community outhouse services on Hornby Island, so it's just for the Hornby Island area. Under that service, we have 4 permanent outhouses, and then we provide 2 temporary outhouses in the summer. So in terms of 2024, we did do a conditions assessment on 2 of the 4 permanent structures. The Sandpiper one is relatively new, so we didn't look at that one. And then the Shields Road one is looking like it's going to get dismantled, and then and BC Parks will look at a new one to replace that one. So we didn't look at a condition assessment for that. So we just looked at these at Little Trip and at the whaling station. So based on that assessment, it showed us that the Little Trib is in poor condition, needs replacement. And at the time now, whaling station is in relatively good condition, but needs to be monitored. Both of these structures, like Little Trib, was built in 1989, and the whaling station was in 1992. So there will be, the whaling station is going to need to be replaced at some point. So we are currently working to replace the Little Trib washroom. And we're still waiting for permits from the province on that project. So in terms of challenges for the service, the reserves are not sufficient to support capital requests and asset management moving forward. Again, the provincial permit wait times are long for asset replacement, and we're still waiting for that for Little Trip. And I spoke to the opportunity with the Shields Road, which will hopefully get taken on by BC Parks moving forward. In terms of expenses, the support services relatively flat, small increase to grants for HERA to do the operational and cleaning work. There's a decrease with the contract and general services because there was that 5,000 was for the condition assessment in 2024, which is no longer there. Small increase to transfer to other services to help with the staffing costs that Parks puts towards the service, and minor capital down slightly. We're looking at no increase to the requisition. There was community works funds that were allocated in 2024 that would be carried forward in support of that Little Trip project. And looking at flat requisition through the 5 years. And nothing really. I guess the only thing to jump in here would be the minor capital, so that in 2027 and into 2028, that's projected placeholder work for whaling station replacement. That's our contributions and transfers out for our FE reserve. So again, $12,000. It's we're looking at, you know, you need somewhere in the vicinity of 30 to replace a washroom. So we're not quite there. The service helps present the introduction of human waste into the environment. It's all delivered through HERA. So a great partnership there. We appreciate all their work helping us with that service. And we're working with Comox and any chip where we're in a archaeological potential area. So happy to take any questions if there are any.
Any questions, Director? Robert?
Yeah, thanks. I'm just wondering what happened to the, gosh, I forget the name of it, but the composting toilet pilot that was running through engineering. We're gonna take from residents of Hornby, we would take it to, and I know there was the first load delivered last year. But this is based on, these are not composting toilets, right? They're empty out, so. But that's why I'm asking before we do replacements, if the pilot on composting toilets is successful, it would be interesting, a bit like at the recycling depot, to see if in the long term. Because right now, a truck has to come on the island, like there's a, you know what I mean? It's the costly part of this service is really the trucking all this waste to Cape Lazo, right? And I'm just wondering, yeah, it'd be nice. Oh, Mark is here. Yeah, he might know actually, but you know, I'd be curious to know if there could be that potential in future replacements to look at that composting toilet approach rather than tanks and empty outs.
Mark?
Thank you, through the CEO and through the chair. So for the composting pilot project, the way that project finished off was we completed study work to look at a couple of different options for Hornby. So composting toilets exist throughout the community, and we looked at a service that could establish a pickup of finished compost from each property. We looked at an option to for the island to coordinate the pickup and then just bring larger quantities of finished compost to our biosolids composting facility at the Cumberland landfill to do the final finishing there. And that's what's ended up being the pilot, is that the CBRD would accept finished finished compost from composting toilets, and then, you know, finally process it at the Waste Management Center, with Hornby Island taking care of any collection. So yeah, that's the way we've left it. But the material that we did receive was a really good quality, no contamination, and you know, completely acceptable for bringing into our system there.
So maybe I can approve this, but for this year, because nothing will happen in 1 year, and for your budget for the one little trip that you want to replace, you know, but I think I'd like engineering and parks to talk about that potential, you know, to have our this service, the comfort station, actually be composting based, because it could help actually lift moving from a pilot to something that's actually more regular. Because I know at the recycling depot, they've had the composting toilet since about 2002 or something. And that seems to work fine. And the public uses it, and, you know, there's respect for it and all that. And it's a different method. And so maybe just conversation between staff is just my request for the coming year. And maybe at some point there'll be a report back on the, maybe there's nothing there, but maybe there is potential there.
If I can just weigh in, I know one thing is that the from research that we've done previously, and I'm not sure if that it's changed or not, but the price of a composting toilet is greater than a pit toilet. So your initial costs will be more in terms of your capital. We still have existing pit toilets there that need to get pumped out. So there's already a vehicle that goes to do the pumping. I think it all gets pumped at the same time, so there's some efficiencies there, so you won't necessarily lose those costs. And then I think the most of the cost actually for this service is the cleaning rather
Okay.
than the actual
Okay, fair enough.
pumping of the facility.
Okay, thanks for that information. Okay, I can pass the plan, but be curious in the future. Thanks.
Okay, so we're on receipt. Did we move it? Yeah, we're on receipt. Any discussion? No. Anyone opposed? Carried, and we have the recommendation. Any discussion? Seeing none, call a question. Anyone opposed? That carries. Now we're moving on to what they call other services.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So these other services, the list there is on the screen, are relatively, I guess, minor and simple in the sense that we haven't put together PowerPoint presentations to support these. On your budget pages, you do have the budget details, and staff are certainly able to speak to any that you have questions about. And I'll just look to Lucy and Kelly if there's anything you want to introduce on any of these in particular, or if you were going to go through them each individually. Yeah, over to Lucy. Lucy?
Yes, through the chair, Kelly just has just a few very brief words to say about each of them and walk through the resolutions as we go. So if that's okay, and then we can address any questions you may have. Just super quick.
Okay.
Thank you through the chair. So services 120 to 124, they're for grants and aid. Grants and aid services were established to provide benefit to the communities to not-for-profits and charitable organizations through a grant. Although the services have been grouped for the purposes of the budget presentation, each is a distinct service with its own requisition and amounts available for the 2025 grants. Area A, Payne Sound, has available $38,002. Area B has $64,966. Area C has $109,549. Denman Island has $12,453. Hornby Island has $15,287. For all years, the 2025 to 29 requisition levels remain flat at the 2024 level. The individual budget reports are captured on the website, and that brings us to the end of the presentation. Staff are available for questions.
Any questions, Director Arbor?
I would ask that the Hornby budget and financial plan be that we add 7,500 to the existing requisition for the grant, the rural grants. And otherwise, I'm good. Yeah. There was a street light I was worried about because it's our smallest service in the regional district. And did I get that right? That it's down to 0 at Hastings Road? So I know Mike Zbarsky's not here, but there, yeah, well, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, he is.
Oh, Mike Zbarsky is here. Hi, Mike. How's
We
it
gotta
going?
make Mike earn his
Yeah,
keep.
I thought when I read the report that the requisition was down to 0 for the Hastings service, which is our smallest service in the regional district. So I'm just curious what's happening there.
Yeah, I was gonna give a little verbal on all of the street lighting.
Oh, yeah,
if
that's
you would
good.
like. I know it's a little bit out of order, but I can speak to that
Just
question
that one,
quickly. There was one street light in that Hastings service area, and when the LED conversion happened with BC Hydro, there was some horse trading of some of the lights with the Ministry of Transportation. So they kind of agreed to take a bunch of the lights that were on the highways, and that was one of them. So we have given them that one, and we're kind of monitoring it this year to see if there's any other need to continue on with this service. But
So they've picked up the cost.
so they're paying the cost of that light. Yeah.
There goes our smallest service. That's very good news, actually. We've graduated that service to the Ministry of Transportation. That is good news. Thanks. The rest is good.
So is it out of order for Mike to speak on street lighting?
No, if the committee would like, it sounds like Mike's prepared on it.
Yeah, he's
couple of speaking notes
here.
there,
He's
so.
He's with us, he's tuned up, he's ready to go.
Can I disagree?
Okay.
May I?
Of course.
Her Majesty's loyal opposition disagrees.
I'm just conscious of the request to amend what we have as proposed, so I don't want to lose that,
Okay.
that
You don't even have to
line of
move though, Mike.
thought.
You can sit there for a minute.
Is that, so Kelly, you've completed presentation of
Yep.
our grants and aid.
Understood.
For clarity, you want 7,500 added to Hornby budget. Okay, so we've got that.
Is that just for 2025 or for all years? 5 years?
Okay, so we will make that adjustment. The resolution is on the recommendation is on the screen there. So you may just want to just finish up with that, and we understand the amendment. So if you want to just go ahead and endorse all that, then we can move on to the next one. Okay. And then we'll,
Moving on second. Okay. We'll call the question. Anybody opposed? That carries. So we're gonna move to, yeah, it's house numbering and heritage conservation. Okay, so move to second on that. Any discussion? Any opposed? Carried. And number 3 is 560, 710, 750, 791 Courtney Flats. I thought Courtney Flats was a parcel tax, but it probably is. Still a service, okay. Director, you want to speak?
Yeah, thanks. So for the Denman Hornby High Speed Internet, I think I had a request. I didn't check if to see if the presentation was updated, but and I know our CEO said that City West will come and speak to us. But there has been connections on the island, and I was wondering if we could see the revenue stream projections into that service.
Thanks. So, and I should just confirm this morning that City West will be presenting to the Electoral Areas Service Committee April 7th. We've been trying to get a presentation for many months, and we've now locked in April 7th. So that's good news, but it's still a bit to come. We've asked for that revenue stream. We don't have a revenue stream coming into that service yet, but we've asked that be part of the presentation for the April 7th meeting. And if there's revenue in 2025, then that's a fairly straightforward budget amendment to reflect that, and we have a policy to address that revenue.
Okay, sounds good. That's good for now. And I guess I can ask if there's anything worthy in the street lighting of new elements that have happened.
Well, we have Mike Zabarski here, who I think has a couple of speaking notes to comment on that. So, Mike.
Yeah, still here, still tuned up and ready to go. I just had a couple of bullet points to just verbally update the committee on, and so one of them you stole already, but the other one was that the BC Hydro rates have been adjusted, so all the budgets reflect that updated BC Hydro rate, and there are 3 street lighting fixes planned because of the LED conversion. When we had those complaints, we've had a couple more over the last year and have budgeted in 2025 to do 1 in Little River, 2 in Union Bay. And so those will just be adjusting the light angles, changing the bulb to a less bright option. So there is some money put aside in those 2 budgets to do that. And that's kind of all I had. So if there's any other questions or thoughts on street lighting, I'm happy to speak to those.
Yeah, I'm really happy that last year we made allowance for, creating those opportunities for those who are not happy, because honestly, this was going to brew up. Like people were not happy with not everyone, but I think that the solution we found has really tempered the problem, and I saw a couple of them that complained, and now they're happy. So good job, Mike.
I just have one, I think I'm just confirming that we've made our way through all of the resolutions required for this section. And if that being the case, we just have one further update that we wanted to provide for you on the Hornby Denman internet service, if that's okay. So
Okay.
just have,
Yeah, we're on 3 now.
okay, so you haven't completed your recommendation on 3.
No.
So that is the last piece that we feel we would just like to communicate. and then we can be done with this group. Okay, go ahead.
You want to proceed with 3? Okay. You want a second? Any discussion?
Kelly, want to provide that?
Kelly, you want to do an update on it?
There
Is
is,
it-
there's a piece of information we want to
Okay.
ensure that you're aware of.
It's on the
for
floor
that
now.
service. Okay.
Thanks through the chair. So the Denman Hornby Island high-speed internet service 560. As we were working through our financial plan for this year, we discovered that there was an error made with the debt that was financed. So the debt was originally supposed to be entered into a 10-year term. There was a mistake made and it was entered into a 5-year term. So we are outside of that, the original proposal for it. The original staff report said that the debt servicing would be at a tax rate of $7.94 per $100,000. We're currently at $8.98 per $100,000, and that will remain the same through the remainder of the term. So it's $1.04 higher than what was projected in the 2022 staff report per $100,000, sorry. $1.04 per $100,000. So we just want to bring that to your awareness that the mistake was made. The debt will be completed in 5 years earlier than was planned, but it is going to cost more over the immediate term.
Good catch, team. Yeah, Director?
Yeah, to be honest, that's a mistake, but to me, that's good news. And that's why layering in the revenue that's gonna come in for at least 15 years, because I know we negotiated for 20 years with City West, but I'm hoping they'll be willing to continue that agreement into the future. And in 5 years, if we're paying the debt faster, that's good. I didn't realize that came out as a small mistake or something like that, but I think for our residents, that has not been the concern. The concern has been, are all houses being connected? And I think City West will be prepared to speak to that when they come. And we've had some difficulties with the project, as everybody's aware, and the community is very aware. But I think as solutions are brought forward, that's actually good news, that we'll retire the debt quickly and that will disappear from taxes, and then we'll actually get revenue into our rural grants for Hornby and Denman, which will be absolutely fantastic. Thanks.
Okay, so we're on recommendation 3 and we're finished with discussion. And I'm going to call a question. All those opposed? That carries. Recreation Core Services. Doug DeMarzo is going to present. Understand. Dudley Doug.
Good morning, and through the chair, this is the recreational core service overview. I think you've seen this a couple times perhaps already, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but please pause me during the presentation if you do have any questions. So essentially, the recreation services looks after our main facilities, and including the exhibition grounds and our large facilities, which are our sports centers and aquatic centers. All these are regionally provided, as they are fairly costly and serve the whole region. Some of the key service outcomes we've been working on really focus on the strategic priorities of this rec commission moving forward, and the connectivity and accessibility to recreational services. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the further presentations. There is a lot of volunteer engagement as well, who lead many of the groups that utilize our facilities, from everything from minor hockey to soccer to figure skating, etc. Here you see some of the key initiatives which you're familiar with. Of note is the new artificial turf field is going through the AP process right now. Again, the corporate energy and emissions plan looks to replace our equipment with more efficient equipment, bringing down our CO2 levels, and will eventually result in a $9 million savings by 2050. We definitely continue to see high use of our buildings and increasing costs for capital projects, and those costs may change with the tariffs coming on. We do have a lot of specialized equipment, and some of it is out of the United States for sure. And we continue to see more opportunities with carbon reduction strategies and continuing to serve our community, as arguably we are currently underserved compared to other communities of similar size based on the amount of facilities we offer. On the Kamalak's exhibition grounds, similar to our, I guess the point to highlight here is agricultural land reserve, and we feel it's important it remains an agricultural land reserve. However, that does adopt a broader permitting process through the ALC, and we have that master plan at the ALC, which we're hoping to hear this year after waiting 2 years for their decision on how we can move forward with the plans for implementing on exhibition grounds. This is one of the few services where you see recovery in our community services portfolio. And you can see the recoveries there in yellow from offering our programs. Again, the recoveries is part of the taxation. So much like our community halls, they're spread out throughout our regions, including the municipalities, which also offer the drive for space. And these big centers are really about coming together to focus on key service areas in the community that really embrace the whole region. And, you know, there's a lot of competing interests out there. And there's some undertones of division felt throughout our society, but our recreation infrastructure really provides those opportunities for all age groups with programs for all incomes levels. It's really where communities meet to play and in some cases excel in their given sport. All they ask in return is for reasonable facilities in our current areas of ice, water, track and field, and are available to our population as a whole, as outlined in the Rec Commission strategic plan, as we look to continue to keep our facilities upgraded and add new facilities in line with our growing population. Any questions?
Got a tough crowd here.
I know.
Doug Garber.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks to Doug. And I really admire all the work that's been done by staff on the rec facilities and the. Of course, I was chair for 3 years last term and working towards asset management, all the rest of it. But what has been left out in the strategic plan is any consideration of decentralizing the future of the facilities, and there's been zero acknowledgement of the distance that residents of Area A have to travel to access those facilities. And I've also spoken this morning about, 80,000 for community halls and now 700,000 going to those facilities from Area A. So I won't be the most popular guy on the block this year, but I will be looking to exit the recreation services for Area A. I've already had conversations with community leaders in Area A, and in April, I'll be bringing forward a paper on that to complement the discussion that is likely to be more friendly around the future of parks for the electoral areas. But it's not right that and boards of the past recognize that. Hornby and Denman unanimously was supported to pay 10% of the requisition of everybody else in recognition that there is that distance and that inaccessibility service. All of the facilities of the recreation are dead center area B, C, Courtney, and Comox. And I know that the Village of Cumberland shares similar concern as they exemplify by not joining ahead of the AP on the artificial turf. Because of that distance and other concerns. So so I'll leave it at that till April. And if it's a service review or other tool, for sure the status quo will not do for Area A. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, Area C shares some of that. When we go up to the northern part of the Area C, it's about equidistance to either Campbell River or Courtney. So we didn't move receipt on this, did we? So let's move along. We don't need a receipt. We can just go right to the recommendation. So I'm just going to move on to 605, Denman Island Recreation Service 606 and 605 for Hornby. Now we're on receipt. Okay. Back over to Douglas.
Thank you through the chair. I encourage directors to stop me on a PowerPoint slide if I go through too fast. This is quite a long PowerPoint, given that it's trying to combine the three services in one and go over the complexities of the different islands. So of course you can keep your questions for then, but feel free to ask me to hold on the slide if you want to look at it a little bit more. So this is really looking at the three services being Denman Island and Hornby Island Recreation, as well as the combined service 607 of the Hornby Denman Recreation Complex contributions. So if we look at this from the Denman Island perspective, they really look at year-round support for programming, as well as Hornby. They both have different models to achieve that, which we'll go through a little bit more. And here's just an overview of your three service functions, as I kind of explained in summary, but really on Denman Island, they focus on teen nights, summer camps, a little bit of money towards the community dock. And they really focus on the gathering place for older adult programming as well, that program. Last year on Hornby Island, they had things like ninja camps, dances, quite a bit of sailing program information, and artistic movement programs. So as you can see, there's quite a diversity of programs offered, and each year largely depends on the coordinator as well as people in the community that want to offer programs. But each year there is things for the community to do through these recreation programs which are delivered. As such, you'll see most of it's a minor increase here, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Well, not for Denman, I guess, on Hornby when I get to that slide. Cost of delivering those programs, mostly through grants to other organizations, through DERA. And just minor increases in line, which you'd expect to see with inflationary costs. And here you see in Hornby Island, the recreation expense. There's quite a notable increase here, and this is due to the coordinator job, but they've asked for a $5,000 increase to their wages to deliver these services. You'll see that reflected throughout here, as well as other costs. Here's the Hornby Island Hero Recreation budget. As you can see, by 2027, you're nearly looking at a $10,000 increase. And out in the funding sources. Then onwards to 607, basically looking at a $33,000 contribution between the two islands to the recreation complexes, with a little bit of support services change in there. No, looks substantial in percentage wise, but it's only $127. We spoke a bit about the 605 budget, mainly granting out to other organizations. 606. This is really a program delivery method. So they create their own, this is Hornby 606. They create their own programs and have their own coordinator position to deliver these programs, as opposed to a variety of different avenues that Denman does. Budget projections, a little bit of reserve here. Again, this is not a game, but this is one where we don't feel reserves are completely necessary, as there may be a small capital request down the road for some sort of, not facility, but equipment maybe, but we haven't had one. So we just continue to put a little bit aside for this reserve. So in summary, we continue to support community recreation through on-island partnerships. And as we indicated earlier, it's really a diverse range of participants and diverse range of programming offered on both these islands. So we are suggesting that the proposed plan be adopted.
And do we have questions? Director Arbor?
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy actually to see the requisitions go up a little bit from a few years ago on Hornby and Denman, because I think when I started it was like 20 grand on Hornby. And I mean, to me, those two services are kind of the example of what my hope is for the rest of Area A for the Bainstown portion, is to actually deliver recreation services in place. And with Hornby contributing an appropriate amount to the big facilities, it has allowed them to create their own services on the islands and have a mixture of volunteers and paid staff deliver that. So I'm really, I know how much work goes into it on Denman and Hornby, and I think we end up with a great mix of financial supports from the tax base and also volunteer effort. So I'm quite happy. And the only thing that doesn't exist why the requisition is not that high on those two islands is there's no recreation center per se, but that's where the link to those community halls earlier, to me, like those budgets are kind of tied together. A lot of the activities on the rec side happen in and around some of those other community facilities. And I just see Bainstown just for the last 20, 30 years, just being starved of that opportunity with how much money they send for recreation to, Courtney. So I'm in favor anyways, for budget purposes, I'm definitely in favor of those two services moving forward. And hopefully in future years, we'll have a Bainstown recreation service that can start to grow and blossom in a similar way. Thanks.
Well, we wouldn't want anybody starving, so we have to move forward because lunch is coming quickly. Any more discussion on this? Seeing none, we're on receipt. Anyone opposed receipt? That carries, and there's recommendation. Move to second recommendation. And seeing no discussion, anybody opposed to the recommendation? That also carries. And we now have, for receipt only, I guess, emergency court services.
Thank you. And through the chair, this is an overview of emergency core services, which is a combination of rural fire department, search and rescue services, and of course, our CBEM emergency management program that serves all our communities. As we go through some of the key service outcomes here, we look at emergency prevention and mitigation. We look at working closely with the Comox First Nation and in consultation with strengthening those partnerships. I'll just recognize here that EDMA, the Emergency Disaster Management Act, has changed substantially and is one of the first acts to incorporate DRIPA and First Nations consultation embedded within the act. And Comox, fortunately, here has always been a partner or has been a partner for a while around our emergency management program. This only strengthens our partnerships there, but also provides as an example for the province to look at other regions on how we build our program. And we've been getting lots of calls and examples. So our CBEM program is pretty strong here. We continue to look at emergency food supply preparedness, partially working with our colleagues in planning and the importance of that. So really, it's an all hazards kind of approach. And as the regulations unfold in EDMA, you'll see the hazard, risk, and vulnerability assessments coming forward, which are a little different than we've seen in the past through previous legislation, which can include pieces such as pandemics, rioting, social upheaval. So it's really all encompassing that the province has put down on us from this example, as opposed to your standard flood, earthquake, fire kind of response. So we're all adapting and changing. And our municipalities have liaisons largely from the fire departments. So it's really become, with our rural fire departments and our municipal fire departments and CVM, and Comox First Nation, a very community-wide approach and understanding the strengths that we have from our emergency management point. This is obviously supported by our first responders that offer different services throughout the community. I won't go into these initiatives aside from the Fire Smart program, which really focuses in on prevention and resiliency planning. And Chief Green will probably speak to that a little bit more. I also wanted just to highlight the search and rescue project the search and rescue support of the Ground Valley Search and Rescue at the previous board meeting was supported for an additional 100,000. So that's 200,000 towards helping them implement their building objectives for a new home. So That's an important piece there as we move. There's challenge, like many of us, for many of our facilities, is finding the land, appropriate land to put it on, but we'll continue to work with them. The rest are mostly around fire hall projects, which will be spoken to a little bit more in depth. I touched on some of these new provincial regulations, and I'll also just note that apparatus costs continue to be a challenge. And in the world of fire departments especially, we're looking at new ways of understanding the fire underwriters insurance and how that impacts the purchase of our fire trucks to be of the best community benefit for the best equipment possible at a reasonable cost. Here you see the expenses, obviously, approaching 6 million. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Sorry, can't quite see the slide there. Our funding sources, mostly looking at a lot of the funding sources are also from provincial grants captured in here through this, mostly through the CVM service. And each fire protection district also has been successful at receiving grant funding in the last few years from the province, as they've seemed to open up the grant funding to support the rural fire departments in a little better way. So in summary, I'll just focus on one thing here, because most of this emergency program is delivered on volunteers, whether it's search and rescue volunteers, rural fire department volunteers, ESS volunteers being called out to fires to help support the community. It's really an important piece of the way we deliver emergency services here. And without our volunteers, I couldn't even begin to guess where we'd be. So real hats off to them at this point. And we hope to continue those strong relationships with associations and those organizations. You know, search and rescue ranges everything from the people out of the New Bay to the boats to the ground search and rescue here in our hometown. So with that, I'll leave you with any questions. Not the New Bay, I take that back. Deep Bay, sorry.
Wasn't there also a marine rescue out of the Deep Bay area, the Bowser area?
Sorry, that's the one I was referring to.
That's the one you referred to. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Director?
Yeah, I think a few years ago, I was approached by them, like, to contribute, right? The 25,000. And do we still do that, or that's in the budget? Or?
Yeah, the board reviewed that budget last week, and they still get the contribution.
Okay,
I can't remember the exact amount right now, but
Yeah.
they're still within that search and rescue service 260.
Sure. And I mean, when you talk about core service, we're just part of the broader region of that. We don't have an EA service portion, right? So say that the three directors outside of the rest of the board wanted to contribute more to the search and rescue building from the areas. Does that conversation have to be with the entire board, or do we have any kind of service or methodology to do our own moves? Because the three of us are very supportive of the building, and at the board, it seems supportive, but I wouldn't say ecstatically supportive. So I'm just wondering if we have a method, if we wanted to make a contribution out of the, I guess we could do community works.
I think
I'll pass it.
if I can, yeah, I think we'd want to take a look at what those options are, because we already have a service in place.
Yeah.
Oftentimes that is the mechanism for providing those funds from the regional district corporately. If there's an interest to go outside of that, that traditional model and that arrangement that we have, and the service purpose and that legislation that comes with that, we'd want to take a look at what means there are to do that. So I don't want to give you a comment or a response on that today.
But-
I would like to take a look at whether or not that is something that has some possibility.
Yeah, but I can raise one for your brainstorming, in that we're just at the starting end of our 10-year community works agreement, right? And there's a lot of money sitting there. And for myself, if you're in the 10-year plan, you know, I think area A, because a lot of search and rescue happens in the areas. And I'd be quite happy to look at 100 to 200,000 community works contribution coming out of my area towards the building. And maybe my fellow directors have also expressed a lot of interest in that. And I think those things would be possible. I find that at the board, there's support, but for 3 years, we've kind of been like, just kind of in the mud in terms of, you know, and I know Doug has done a great job of saying, you know, there's a lack of land and there's this and then that, but to me, more money is always helpful, right? So.
bring cash. Director Hardy.
Yeah, thanks. Just to add a little bit more to Director Arbor's comments there. I'm just kind of wondering if I remember correctly, some of the issues kind of revolved around asset ownership and who owned the building at the end of the day. So I'm just wondering again, if we're adding to the conversation or comments to Director Arbor there, is there the ability for the areas to purchase the building and then consequently we own the building or the lands, and that helps address some of those issues that were brought up the other day? Thanks.
Yeah, I think there's abilities to purchase buildings. We don't have a firm building or haven't been directed to make any of those types of inquiries for a purchase of a building. The issue is that you're referring to is around borrowing. So if we were to borrow to support search and rescue, we would have to own the land or the borrowing, whatever we're asking to do. So with the exception of community works funds, that's the case for ownership if you're in that borrowing. Otherwise, it would just flow through as a grant, which we currently do through 265, which is the search and rescue service. So I think that's probably what my reference. I don't know, does Lucy have anything to add?
Yeah, just to add to what Doug's saying, for sure, from a borrowing perspective, we need to own the asset. That having been said, it's still not at a place that is an option that's out there. We're owning the building, we're leasing it back. So there's ways to facilitate this. And in that situation where, for example, we're not owning the building and search and rescue is fully owning that building, we have the ability to still increase grant dollars going out them to help them to cover their overall costs, with part of that being financing that they've gotten on their own. From the use of community works funds to facilitate this, be much more difficult if it's a building that they own. And this all comes back to greater restrictions in language around when the community works dollars are going out to one of our community partners. There's just a bit more due diligence around that in the agreement. So whenever we're contemplating those kinds of situations, and we'll just absolutely be going back to UBCM and saying, this is what our board would like to do. How does that, is that eligible? Just get that confirmation before we move forward. So there's a possibility and there's ways. And what is a definite no is that we cannot undertake borrowing for something that we don't own.
Well, yeah, no, that is one solution, is to own it. But the other is what we had Hayek here this morning, the Hornby Arts. And I mean, when I first approached staff at the regional district, it was a bit the same language as Lucy, very difficult for us to give community works to a nonprofit organization. But we persevere, and at the end of the day, I think UBCM was totally fine with it. We ended up freeing up $175,000, which ended up leveraging a whole bunch of other funds. So I know from experience it's doable. And so I think between ownership and also having a more significant contribution, again, write me down, staff will bring back options, but if staff brings back the option that attributes some of our 10-year plans, community works fund, count me in. I won't do that with every service. Everybody here around this table knows that. But in rural areas, there's a ton of support for search and rescue. And I was at a fundraiser last summer and organized in Area A, and you're talking about lives saved and people talking about, what's the value of a life. So it's the same with our fire services. We love to support our fire services and find ways to make the projects happen, like Mount Washington. But I see search and rescue very much in that basket as well, so I am, when staff comes back, just keep that in the back of your mind, that I think you've got a willing electoral area directors here, and Edwin hasn't spoken, but he's spoken in the past around the support for this.
Well, I will remind everybody we have a lot of to plow through yet, and this was just basically for receipt of information. Been a good discussion. Let's carry on and vote on receipt. Anybody opposed? That carries. And we're on to Rural Cumberland Fire Protection Service. And over for introductions.
Thanks, and Bruce Green will be introducing, I believe, 8 individual services for for your various fire protection services in the rural areas. Bruce is our regional rural fire chief and is all set to go. So Bruce, 210, rural Cumberland.
Thank you through the CEO, the chair, and the directors. The first service we're going to do is 210 Rural Cumberland Fire Service. It is an area of the regional district that is around the village of Cumberland. So we do contract the village of Cumberland to provide that service. We do have a 2-year contract with them. We usually do a 5-year contract, but the village just had a fire administration review or something done and they wanted to do an in-depth look at that. So that's why it was only a 2-year contract. The cost of the service is determined by the net cost to the village of operating the fire department. And the Cumberland Fire Department responded to 48 incidents in the rural Cumberland area last year. There's no change in the full-time the hours. And there again, the biggest cost to this service is the grant to the Cumberland Fire Department or the village of Cumberland to run this. And it did go down slightly this year. The funding sources, my eyes aren't that good. But I believe it's fairly stable over the years. There's our operating budget projections. And with this, like, because it's a contract, there's not much going into reserves because we own nothing that goes there. So we don't have to replace anything. In summary, it's the contract is fiscally responsible for the fire protection services. It's an area that we don't have a RD fire department nearby, so it provides that protection to the residents. And the village of Cumberland does a great job providing that service. With that, I open it up to any questions.
Questions, Director?
Yeah, thanks. And it was really good to go through the the fire hall build in Cumberland, and I want to pass my comments to the village that I think they did a great job as reflected in our financial contribution. There was a bump, but I think they did a great job of building a fire hall at an affordable cost for ratepayers, and I think we'll be doing the same in Union Bay pretty soon. I would express interest back to Cumberland to try to have a 5-year contract. I understand that they are under service review, but for me, it's just like a minor flag that gets raised. We do appreciate being part of them, but I just hope it's reciprocal as well. And I mean, they're mostly servicing a pretty rural area for us in the periphery of Royston, and if I need to talk to Mayor Brown, just give me plenty of heads up if you see any kind of what do you call it? Rough roads.
No, I think the biggest part about that is the person that Chief Williamson was working with was new in his position as well. And this fire service review had just completed, so they want to learn their position and understand the review. I don't think there's any issues with the contract. It was just them understanding the contract and looking at how the fire service review links into that contract.
Okay, sounds good. Somebody want to move the recommendation? Any discussion? Any opposed? Carries. Moves on to Denman Island Fire Protection Local Service Area 215.
Okay, so the service area is obviously Denman Island inclusive, no place other than Denman Island, although they do have mutual aid agreements with every fire department in the valley, and Denman and Hornby Island have utilized mutual aid agreements together and did several responses. 2024 accomplishments, they did 137 responses. The new engine that they ordered in 2023 arrived and was put into service last year. They purchased a new to them duty officer vehicle. They've done lots of community engagement, fire smart public education. They took on 5 new recruits, and they have developed 3 more water sources to help provide water in the need of a fire. And just this trends, challenge, and opportunities, I think you'll see this slide fairly often through every one of these fire budgets, so I might just slip over it. The biggest ones we have is like everybody, the cost escalation on equipment and supplies. The new Fire Safety Act, we're still figuring out how that's going to affect us. Delays in deliveries of needed equipment. An example of that is I ordered fire hose in December, and I think it's going to be here in August. So trying to get the equipment when we need it. We've applied for the $40,000 CPEP grant, and we'll continue to do that, and as well as a CRI grant and Fire Smart initiatives that the CRI grant helps us pay for. The strategic priorities is the new Devon Island Fire Hall replacement. We're not sure what that's going to look like yet. We just completed a asset management plan for the fire hall, so we want to do a fulsome review of that and see the length of the fire hall, what it's going to look like. The other parts of that is, I'm sure you're aware that BC Ambulance leases the land that the Devon Island Fire Department owns, and we have a licensed occupation for where the fire hall is. So it's trying to figure out how that's all going to work moving forward. And the lease with BC Ambulance expires in 2026. So we want to have a whole holistic look at how that replacement is going to look like. The one big change here is the Devon Island Fire Chief is putting in lots of hours, or looking at moving him to a 0.83 in 2025 and to a full-time position in 2026. The one big change here is the debt charges, because we've got the new engine. There is the new debt charges that have to come to service the engine, and that's fairly substantial. And as we mentioned earlier, the personnel costs did go up due to the increase in Chief Mattering's hours. The revenue is all from taxation, and there is some the government grants and also the lease that we get from the BC Ambulance for the land that their ambulance station is on. And it's a fairly level requisition over the years, just allowing for inflation. And there's our operating budget projections from 2026 to 2029. As I mentioned earlier, we completed the asset management update of the fire hall. As was mentioned by Doug, fire underwriter survey dictates when we have to replace our engines, which puts a strain on us, but we're looking at different ways of doing that. And then same as our turnout gear. Turnout gear, no matter if it's been used or not, every 10 years it has to be replaced per WorkSafe BC. So we're, when we look at asset management, majority of the stuff that we manage is dictated by regulation when it has to be changed. This year, speaking of, they have a fill station that isn't compliant with WCB. Every fill station has to have an oxygen or a CO monitor on it. Theirs doesn't. It's going to cost them $8,000 to put that monitor on so they can fill up bottles. They're going to continue with their ongoing purchase of gear. And like I mentioned earlier, we're going to determine the best path forward for the fire hall based on the asset management plan. Capital plan, we have those funds in there for the hall. We have no idea what that is. It's just want to make aware, like I think when we did the Union Bay Fire Hall, we got a shock to what the price escalations were. So that's just a dartboard projection, and we have no idea until we do a good asset look at the plan and where we're going to go. Long-term capital plan is in 2020, 30, $50,000. The reserves are fairly good all over. There's future expenditure reserves, capital works and machinery. And then the summary, we're exploring opportunities to continue the cost of keep the costs down. We're looking at grants and partnerships as much as possible and joint purchasing. They're trying to switch out all their electric equipment to gas equipment to electric equipment whenever possible. And like I mentioned earlier, they are part of the Valley-wide mutual aid agreement. The Indigenous relations, we're continuing to develop offering training courses to make the staff more aware. And the inclusivity, we're always working on making an inclusive culture within the fire department, because at the end of the day, we just need firefighters. It doesn't matter who or what you are. With that, I open up to any questions.
Questions, comments, Director?
Yeah, it was great to see you kind of mix up the two communities. I think it's in Black Creek, they're moving from electric to gas powered.
Yeah.
And Deadman, the reverse. In terms of the fire hall, yeah, I mean, that $6 million, just have it on a sheet of paper, it's kind of scary to residents. And I know there's other options to consider, such as a, an extensive renovation. As you said, the asset management plan will dictate that. And I think, as we've discussed before, the land question probably comes first. We had a presentation yesterday from our waste management and looking at the Denman garbage service. And they're having to do a major roof repair, and the whole question about, being on a lot at the old school and all that. So there's probably a need for our senior management team to kind of get together around a land strategy for Denman and the fire hall, or, to just kind of review what our long-term needs are beyond the fire hall, and then the partnerships. I know that's already been explored with BC Ambulance and all that, but it'd be nice to try to figure out something that suits a couple of needs anyways. And you said the requisition was flat, maybe a little bit from year to year, but in the long-term financial plan, I think it's jumping from 500 to 775 in a couple of years from now. So I would not call that.
Well, I think that's in planning for the fire hall
fire hall,
asset.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and we don't know what that is. We
Yes.
have to include that in there.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
that is what's happening. So we're going to increase the requisition towards that. And on the grant side, I mean, there's a portion of community works, and maybe that's question staff, like for Denman, I think, and Hornby, we're accumulating about 1.2 million for the next 10 years. Now I've identified Denman Fire Hall as one of the top 2 priorities, definitely on the Denman side. But I'm kind of hoping it won't be Union Bay. I'm kind of hoping that we can do something that, with the current site and current fire hall, that maybe that something could happen. I don't know. As anybody, I'm forever hopeful that we'll find some cost-efficient piece. But by the end of this year, where would you think we would be in the planning stage? Like if we forecast in the next budget, what would be the goal? To have land identified, or to?
Well, we were waiting for a community, the hall assessment to be done so we can
Yeah.
fold it. So we're going to start looking at that this year as to where we're going to go and what that looks like. Again, opening up conversations with BCM and where they see themselves. Do they want a partnership? Do they want to stay there? Because BCM is an important part of the island, and that's an ideal location for them. So it's trying to make sure it works for everybody.
Okay, so I am bringing the Minister of Health and the Rural Health State Minister, Junior Minister, to Hornby and Denman this year. And that was mostly to look at ambulance service on Hornby. But that would be if staff can be there for the Denman portion, maybe we could have a stop at BC Ambulance and with the fire department to try to talk about what we're trying to achieve. And that is under purview this year, the health. So it's a good time. It would be a good time to situate, because I've actually never raised that project with her, not thinking about that potential BC Ambulance partnership. So I'll just flag it to staff, and I think it'll happen in the summer. So just as a heads up.
Lucy, did you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I just have a common suggestion around community works funds. We did say as we went through that we would look to see where we may be able to leverage dollars in order to take pressures off taxations. And as probably one of the large increases that you see there is the debt that's come on. $118,000 worth of debt, and that's on a previous decision, which I think you're quite aware of. We just want to put out there, is this a place that it was a fire truck that we debt financed of $550,000. And if that's a place where you want to use some of the community works funds, then we're an absolute big fan of wherever there's debt to try to bring it down or eliminate it.
So what you're saying, we're not locked in, like we could actually do a pay down on it using community. And what's our interest rates on that loan?
Kelly can answer the rate, and from a short-term debt, that's the beauty of short-term. We're not locked.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that'd be cool to see that option, because maybe that could take the edge off and ahead of the fire hall build. And Okay, thanks for that suggestion.
You just give me 1 second. I'll see if we can, we know what the implications are right now. Kelly she'll give you an update there.
Really?
Thank you. So we financed that fire truck purchase with debt, short-term debt. So the implications across the 5 years is $110,000 for principal repayments, and then the interest, it's declining over the years, but it's about $23,000 a year on average. The interest rate, I think, is at 4.5% right now on the.
Ain't gonna get cheaper.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm willing to adjust it,
No.
the financial plan
On the
today
fly.
on that, but maybe more information over the course of the year, and that's a decision we could make next year. And we'll have more information on the fire hall itself at next budget. So, but that's a great flagging of that one. Thank you.
Big thing that's falling out of these meetings is information. A lot of information we would never discuss otherwise. Okay, so we're finished with discussion. Any recommendation? Any discussion on that? Anyone opposed? That carries. And over the water to Hornby Island.
So there again, Hornby Island is the all-inclusive on the island. The 2024 accomplishments, they did 184 responses. We formalized an agreement for them to use the clinic for after hours, do some BCS issues, not being on the island and potentially losing after hours doctors. Chief Chinnery is working diligently with BC Wildfire to do a fuel management treatment in 2025. Chief Chinnery responded with us with Oyster River to the Hulker Mountain Fire this year to get some good experience in how that works. 80% of their tools are switched to battery tools and and that's all been used through grant funding. Same thing. And the one I want to put out here is the BCHS. Chief Chinnery's been working very well with BCHS, and we know there's some issues on the island, but the ambulance that Hornby Island uses right now to transport patients, they've worked with BC Ambulance. They brought that ambulance over for substantial repairs, which BC Ambulance covered all the repairs of that ambulance. So that's a step in the right direction, both partnerships. No change to the full-time equivalencies. And the other one to look into here is as we move forward, currently HIRA does the bookkeeping for Hornby Island Fire Department. Hornby Island Fire Department is looking at potentially forming an association and taking on that bookkeeping themselves, which would could project some cost savings to them, they're looking at that right now for this year. Revenue through taxation. And there's the funding sources for where it's looking out for the next 5 years. And there again, everything there is fairly stable over the years. There is cost of living inflation going on, but there's no major stuff happening. And there again, the Hornby Island Fire Department will be taking delivery of a new tender to them this year that was ordered. So there will be some interest costs that are going to be accumulated over the years for that and payment. We did the same thing, complete the asset management plan for the fire hall. Trucks, like I said earlier, is all mandated by regulation is when everything is replaced. In the 2025 capital plan, they want to get a gear extractor, which is a fancy word for a washing machine that gets the carcinogens out of the bunker gear. Replace whaling station water tank, get some battery operated Auto X tools, and replace some SCBA bottles. And of note, the SCBA bottles, Auto X tools, and the gear extractor Chief Chinnery did apply for in the CEPF grant. So if we are successful in getting that grant, those costs will be covered by the grant. And there's a long-term capital plan or for replacement of trucks and equipment. And there again, in 2026, there's a truck replacement, and Chief Chinnery, that's a duty officer vehicle, is looking replacing that with an electric type vehicle. The reserves, the future expenditure reserves, capital works and machinery reserves, and there again in 2029 they go down, but there will be apparatus that's purchased in there. And that is the same as with what I discussed with Devon Island. And the bigger one here is, I think, the relationship with BC Ambulance is getting better with the chief and them helping to pick up some costs. So let's hope we can continue to develop that moving forward. With that, open it up to any questions.
And we have questions, Director?
Yeah, thanks. Great update. And I really like all the work that's happening on Hornby at the fire department. And I mean, the BC wildfire was one line, but I talked about it earlier in the meeting about that attempt to collaborate on reducing fuel loads in the central area of the island, and like that's huge forward thinking to risks management.
So just we are with the Howie's group, we are completing a CWRP for our regional CWRP. And in there is recommendations for fuel management on places which we will be applying for grant funding to get done on islands and other areas.
That's amazing. Yeah, keep going, because that's where the future is, to think differently around our forested environments. And in fact, what I think triggered Chief Chinnery and others on the island is we had a forestry symposium, and we had Dr. Laurie Daniels and other talk about the indigenous ways actually that they used to manage forests and landscapes completely different, and that would reduce fire risks, and try to get back to that rather than our current method of just cutting down trees and then letting second growth take over, and like with all the fuel load associated with those mono forests. And so I wish that work will inform Mosaic in time, but we're a far cry from that. I said I wouldn't mention them. I would be kind to them for 6 months. But one question I had with the fire department for Hornby is there, like you mentioned, the potential to change the bookkeeping and such? That would be actually pretty big thing on Hornby with HIRA and the rest of it. So how advanced is that? It's just because I know there's been consideration for a few years, but
there has been talk. HIRA is aware of the conversations, and I know we're looking at through this year to explore that option. Okay. And if it does come to fruition, it'll take place next year.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks for the heads up. And as I recall, in fire departments, you have to have your own associations. That's something you could bring into the CVRD for the CVRD to do the bookkeeping?
No, it has to be a nonprofit association. And then the RD, we would go in agreement with the association to provide the bookkeeping services.
As we do currently with.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that update. I'll look forward to more information on that for the coming year.
Any other questions, directors? I would entertain going straight to the recommendation. Seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. Anyone opposed? Carried. Now we're on to Fanny Bay 225. And back over to. Okay.
So Fanny Bay, as you're well aware, our fire service review had us join Fanny Bay and Union Bay fire halls together. That is working well. They're continuing to work out some of the bugs, but it's becoming a very robust fire department with the two together. There was 46 responses in the Fanny Bay area. They purchased a new to them rescue truck, which we're there again with FUS and looking at trying to get used vehicles instead of brand new vehicles, which is a cost savings to the taxpayers. And they purchased equipment and training using last year's CEPF grant. Everything is there. What we've talked in the fire departments, it's just for us, And just how long it takes us to get the needed equipment is very challenging. No change to the positions. And this one in there again, in this year's budget, there's projected to replace their tender, which is going to have some implications over the next 5 years. And so the other one I forgot in the expenses is because of the joining of the two fire departments, and Chief Ham is running both there and running the operation budget. So there is a transfer to Union Bay Fire Association to offset all the operating costs associated with that. There's the requisition, and like there again, over the next 3 years, because we're buying a new tender, the prices are going up, but I think we'll explore all options to see if that's got to be a new tender or a used tender, and that could affect. But right now, we're planning for a new one, and then we'll explore the options. Not much change there other than the tender moving forward. Asset management plan was completed for Fanny Bay Fire Hall, and then all the fire underwriters and work safety mandating when we replace equipment. New tender this year, and then to try and keep, like I mentioned earlier, bunker gear expires in 10 years. So we're trying to replace 2 years of two sets of gear a year to keep the tax requisition even instead of spiking in 1 year. And then they're starting to replace radios and pagers. There's a capital plan. Annual capital equipment, we got 300,000, the big $300,000 for the tender, which in Fanny Bay is needed because there's lots of areas without fire hydrants. Reserve balances. Future expenditure reserves, and you can see the drop next year because we're going to the tender. And there again, the biggest, they're part of the regional aid agreement, but the two fire departments working together, I think, has increased the response area in that area because you've got lots more firefighters available to respond. So that's working well for the fire department and the residents in that area. With that, I open up to any questions.
No questions? That's great. We'll go right to the recommendation. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Oh, I'm sorry, too fast. I thought Lucy was trying to get me to move faster.
I'll go super quick, but I just want to confirm. New debt coming on again for another fire apparatus. I'll just make the same assumption. We'll bring that forward when we're returning and looking at community work funds and potentially trying to alleviate the short-term debt as well. As I'm sure you're aware, right? The part of increasing taxation in this service has to do with debt as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if I may, I'll be curious to see when the new tender for Union Bay is planned, or if there's one plan or.
There isn't a tender plan for Union Bay. They're all hydrated.
Right.
So, but then if Union Bay develops into unhydrated areas, that'll be something we'll have to look at in the future, depending on what that the expansion looks like.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone opposed? That carries. Now, on to Union Bay.
There's the service area of Union Bay, a very long and narrow strip. The 2024 accomplishments, 107 responses, designed for the new fire hall. In the midst of an AAP process, actually awaiting the decision on the 19th, I believe. Purchased equipment for the training from the CFIP grant, and they participated in several community events. Waiting for the AAP process, it's a good opportunity, and hopefully it's realized the fire hall is needed, and we'll move forward with that project. Unfortunately, with that project, there's an increased taxation to meet the service needs, and we are applying, like I said, all the fire departments applied for the $40,000 for this EPF grant this year. Just an update on the priorities initiatives. we are currently in the AEP process, so that will potentially have an effect on what if the AEP is unsuccessful or successful, it's gonna really affect the budget, but we're planning on being successful. No change to the full-time equivalencies. And there again, the biggest change to this one is the debt that we're gonna be taking on for the new fire hall moving forward. And as I mentioned in the previous one for Fannie Bay, there's the $105,000 coming in from the Fannie Bay to offset some of the costs for operating the Fannie Bay Fire Hall. And because of the fire hall, the debt will be increasing over time, as will the tax requisition. And the biggest change here will be the fire hall coming on board. And when I get to the next one, same as we've talked about with all the fire halls. Plan, we want to do the new fire hall, replace 2 sets of bunker gear, a new engine in 2026, and a new fill station in 2026. And I think it's important to note, because this came up at one of the open houses, is that there was $1.7 million in reserves when the RD took over Union Bay, and finance has utilized that money, as you can see, in 2026, 2027, 2028. There's some finance, huge assets coming on, but that's all going to be used through reserves. So there'll be no debt funding coming on to take on those resources. So finance did a great job of planning to just put the fire hall and then use the reserves for all those other purchases. There's the update on the fire hall where February 19th, we'll know. The reserves, future expenditure reserves, capital works. And the summary is the same as majority of the fire halls. With that, I open up to any questions.
Fine. Okay. Yeah, no, thank you for the presentation, and I was glad to see Jim Elliott actually is the one who caught the 1.7 million. Where was it? And I was glad that he did, because I had lost track of that from the improvement district days, and I do agree with you that staff has done a good job to try to mitigate debt in the short term ahead of the fire hall planning. So I think that's a good rationale. I wish I'd had that full information when I spoke to him, but either I couldn't remember or whatever. So the AAP actually is, for the housing and the artificial turf, I think is going to pass no problem. The fire hall in Union Bay is on the No AAP website now. There's 350 forms against the fire hall, and our threshold is 105. So I'm a little bit nervous, not too nervous, because I imagine that a lot of people that sign the form are actually in Black Creek and Comox and other places. I think there's a lot of confusion around the AP. But this being said, we're 3 times the number of forms against the Union Bay. I can tell you that's not what I read on the street in Union Bay. And my expectation is that we will get there. I figure I would have heard it by now if there was that big of a position of 100 people, but I haven't. So fingers crossed. If it fails, February 25th, I will ask this board to go to referendum right away, like just pass a motion and go to referendum, because I know the overall community is behind this and understand the initiative. So I just want to say that publicly in case anybody listens, but I've said that at town halls in Union Bay as well. The reason why I asked for that slide is, have we ever initiated discussions as, in the next few weeks, KFN will go to treaty? And I know they have bigger fish to fry right now, but as we do the fire hall, there's been very little discussion, in my opinion, or maybe I'm not privy to it, around fire services to their future treaty lands, and there's lack of, roads, all that discussion. The reason why I bring it up now is I wouldn't bring it up now in the next 4 weeks, but should treaty pass, it might be interesting to start discussing potential fire needs of Comox First Nation in the long term, right? As they may develop their lands.
Thanks for that, Director. And yeah, certainly that's there's several discussions that we do have in servicing, whether it be water, sewer, or other community amenities and benefits are part of those discussions. To date, we haven't had deep discussions on fire servicing, but that is another community amenity service that's critical for community development. So it would be part of the conversation going forward, no doubt. And I think the proposed Union Bay Fire Hall is well situated to be able to provide for supporting that kind of conversation.
Yeah, so maybe in the slide next year to add that, just potential to explore, so that we live somewhere.
Okay, so again, I'm gonna go right to the recommendation. And anyone opposed? That carries. Do you guys want to keep plowing through, or do you want to fill a plate and plow through? Do them all. Okay, so on to Bates Huban, I guess, next.
So Bates Huban is a small area that borders the city of Courtenay and the Comox Fire Protection District and that we have a contract with the town of Comox to provide service for. As with rural Cumberland, the cost of the service is determined by what it costs for the town to operate the service, their own fire service. There's no change to the full-time equivalency. The requisition is fairly stable.
Oh, wow.
Revenues all from taxation. And there again, this over the years, because the contract, it's fairly reasonable and it works well for all parties involved. There's a 5-year projections and there's a $500 increase over the next 5 years, and that's it. Future expenditures, reserves. The contract isn't provided, provide fiscally responsible fire service, and the community partnerships provide service by way of contract with the town of Comox. With that, I open up to any questions.
Any questions, directors? Looks pretty cut and dried. I got one question. What I don't see on here is we got the Sola Merville Fire Protection District, but the all the parts in Area B and you know, the Cessar Road and all that area, Piercy Road, that's all serviced by Courtenay.
Yeah, the Courtenay Fire Protection District, which is an improvement district, has a contract with the city.
Oh, so they do it on the old style.
Yeah, it's same as there's parts of Comox, the Comox Fire Protection District has an
Yeah, because of the spit and all that, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure where the Comox, I know the Comox Fire Protection District is down near Sail Bay and Waveland Road area.
Okay.
I'm not sure where all it goes, but they're an improvement
They
district.
still got the improvement.
And they have an agreement with the town of Comox.
Oh, so that's why it doesn't show up here. Okay, I was just trying to figure that out. So they're still under the improvement district system. Okay.
And Ships Point and Royston.
Yeah, and Royston. Okay, well, there's probably possibilities there maybe in the future. No questions? Okay, so the recommendation? Any opposed? That carries. And make Merville greater again. Over to Fire Chief Green.
Lisa, can you adjust the slides? So there's the Greater Merville Fire Protection Area. It does border with Oyster River's Fire Protection Area as well as the Courtenay Fire Protection District. Responded to 170 calls. Jointly did a support trailer with Oyster River, Mount Washington, the support trailer. The idea of that is because they're rural, they don't have the capacity in there. We've got 6 cascade systems and we're decon and other supports that we can bring the trailer to a fire scene, fill up air bottles and keep the firefighters safe by getting them showered and cleaned at the fire scene. And we took on 6 new recruits last year. Same challenges that we're facing in all the fire services. No change to the full-time equivalency. And here again, the biggest cost is the transfer to other functions because we're funding Oyster River to run the fire department. we've gone down a little bit in the proposed budget. The revenue or the funding sources tax requisition over the next 5 years is fairly stable. There's not much change to the service. The biggest change will come in 2029 when we replace the tender with a new tender. We did an asset management plan, same thing. We're mandated by legislation is when we have to replace all of our equipment. And 2029, as I mentioned earlier, is 750 for a tender. And there again comes that time we'll look at what's the best way. We're planning on new, but a used tender if it's available might be a better option. In 2032, that's going to replace the SCBA bottles because they have a 15-year lifespan. The reserves, projected balances, future expenditure reserves, growing over time. Capital works and machinery reserves. And 2029, that'll be when the tender comes in. And the summary is the same as the other fire departments. With that, I open up to any questions.
I don't have any questions, just lots of praise. There we are. Okay, so again, let's move right to the recommendation. Any opposed? Carries. And out to Mount Washington. Yeah, please. I got a couple I was saving for the end here.
Yeah, before we do it, because that'll be the final source of the day too, and don't want to extend the meeting after that. But for fire services, you brought up the Courtney Improvement District. Is there any hint that they might fold at some point? Because I do it's not a worry, but I do wonder sometime about the public accountability of that service. You know, I think it's a very small organization and it doesn't run through our processes. They are all in rural areas and contracting to Courtney directly, but I never hear from them. They don't have a website, I don't think. Like, I'm just curious at what point that improvement district could fold under our regional district for services.
I think, you know, there's many different improvement districts around the province, and in the regional district, we've had experience in several conversions, of course, you're familiar with. It's always possible that an improvement district comes forward or runs into some trouble. And we would have to then consider a conversion. I don't know that we have any direct line of sight on imminency on the possibility of that happening in a quick way. It's always a possibility. We're always ready for that consideration. I think it's also something that we're not actively going out to try to achieve or undertake, recognizing that the improvement districts do have autonomy and some independence, and so it's not been a focus for us to be actively undertaking.
Yeah, I may suggest I would be interested in actively pursuing it. I mean, all of Royston is currently serviced by the Courtney Improvement District. That's a ton of homes. And I don't see the Courtney Improvement District ever running into trouble because they don't own any assets. All they do is negotiate a contract with the city of Courtney every few years. So I don't see them ever getting in trouble. But at the same time, I just don't feel that necessarily that the Royston voices and all the residents that are used to having accountability and you know, all the other services are with the regional district that want to stand out. So I wouldn't be too aggressive, but I think I would be interested in showing that, maybe sending a letter to say, hey, you know, by the way, we could be interested in taking over the service from the improvement district. And maybe that would be a relief to them. They're volunteers, and I understand they don't have a huge board, so yeah.
On to Mount Washington.
Mount Washington is up on the mountain at the resort. There's a small area that comes down towards on the highway. We did purchase a new to us ladder truck when we got the one when Comox replaced theirs. We took their used one at $62,000 compared to 1.5, and due to fire underage ratings in the smaller village, we can use that up there for 10 years and be rated. New fire hall site considerations have been greatly narrowed down. There was 11 responses last year. The biggest challenge up in the mountain is the short construction window for the new fire hall. We're working through that as we speak. That's the biggest challenge up there that's different from the rest of the fire services. We can talk about that later. No change to the full-time equivalency. And here again, transfer other services that's transferred to Oyster River Fire Department to manage that fire department and the service up there. And there is some cost escalations built into that with the anticipation of the new fire hall coming online. Proposed budget is down this year. The TAC requisition, from what I remember, is fairly stable over the next 5 years. And that's because the new fire hall process is a lot through grant funding and community works and growing communities funds. And as you can see, their projections is fairly stable for the next 5 years. Minor equipment purchases. The biggest one we're trying to figure out now is how to respond to meet firefighter survey ratings within the Alpine Village in the winter. It's because we can't take an apparatus in there, so we have to get a track vehicle that holds X amount of gallons of water that pumps so much. So we're exploring those options right now. And there's already funds set aside for that, but it's a challenge that we're working with. And 2030, that's the 10-year replacement of the ladder truck. And there again, the plan is just to continue buying used apparatus upon there. The reserves projected, future expenditure reserves, fairly healthy. Capital works and machinery reserves are fairly healthy. With that, I open up to any questions.
My only question is, are we going to be able to break ground this year, or is this just going to be a planning year again? Do we know?
My ultimate goal would be to break some ground this year, get some foundations put in, but can you finish off next year? Because the year that we're in the process to potentially build is the year they've had the most snow in the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, it'll be snow in June. One other question though. When we talk about the, again, I always use the word tone deaf, but obviously the government is tone deaf with the new Fire Act and fire inspections. The whole EDMA thing even is a download in disguise. But the fire underwriters, you know, there's been talk for so many years about them maybe relaxing policies around because it's basically unsustainable in the modern age. The fire rudders, they aren't a Canadian company, are they? They're a multinational, are they not?
I'm not sure that. I just know they're based out of the Lower Mainland.
They are?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought they were based in the
They've got an
States.
office in the Lower Mainland we deal with now, whether they're a multinational corporation or just for Canada, I'm not sure.
So they're obviously, you know, being pressured by vested interests to keep this going forward when I say it's unsustainable. Yeah, so I think, you know, that obviously that senior government and the fire underwriters need a little bit of a tuning up to modern times. But when we talk about our turnout gear after so long having to go and talk about perfectly good gas-powered power tools that, you know, are negligible as far as greater climate change goes, do we give that to third world countries who are happy to get it? Is there?
Yes.
It doesn't end up in landfill, I'm
No,
sure.
like our bunker gear, when our bunker gear gets unrated, we'll use it for our new recruits for training because they don't need rated gear until they start riding
Okay,
the truck.
perfect, yeah.
And then there is Firefighters Without Borders takes a lot of our gear and goes down to Mexico or third world countries.
Or
and provides that
Zimbabwe
gear.
or something.
Yeah.
Or Ukraine.
So none of our turnout gear ends up, we donate it to somebody who passes it on down the road.
Perfect, thanks. Director?
Yeah, thanks. That's perfect item to close out the meeting with. I just want to say congratulations to Director Grieve, Chair Grieve, for all of his years of advocacy on Mount Washington, and for staff to craft a pretty amazing partnership with Vancouver Island Mountain Center. That project has had huge amount of roller coaster. I think when I was first elected, you were talking about Mount Washington, so that's at least 6 years, and I think dating back further. So huge congrats to all of you. And if you don't break ground this year, you know, at December 31st, I'm happy to go with you, Chair Grieve, and we can bring a shovel and break ground on the last day of the year.
I want a photo op. Come on. The other thing I want is to make sure that all the fire departments realize whenever they have a hot dog day, please CC all the area directors because we don't like to pass up a free lunch. So I think that brings us to the end of a perfect day and we can have some lunch as well. So I'd like to thank staff. Oh, we're not through yet.
Yep, well, actually, Chair, you have the recommendation here to still approve.
Oh, we haven't done the
340.
recommendation. Okay,
And
let's.
then there is one more service to bring back from earlier in the day.
Oh,
function
okay,
670.
okay. Well, let's move to the recommendation on this one. Moved and seconded. Anybody opposed? That carries. And over to Lucy, I guess.
Yeah, I think Lucy is gonna introduce this, although we've got some, I think, a recommendation for the screen as well. So Lucy?
Yes.
Oh, right, we were gonna bring this back today.
That's right. So as we mentioned this morning, that we just needed a bit of time to craft this resolution fully. So it's here in front of you at this point in time. And I just have one thing to add to your fire hall conversations just before you finish as well. So I'll just say that. So hopefully this is much clearer in what you wanted to occur. That the proposed plan is amended by adding the additional $10,000. That'll come from taxation, and this will allow us to distribute a $30,000 grant. And secondly, just the confirmation that the 17,500 that was approved in the 2024 budget, that was an operating grant, will be just in essence was authorization to distribute it to be used for in line with the operating expenditures that the Art Center has described to you today that they have incurred.
Moved second on the recommendation. Any discussion on it? And anybody opposed to it? And that carries.
Just have one note for you on the Denman Fire Hall. And that's just wanted to make sure there's awareness. We do have 850,000 in growing community grants allocated to that. And there is that window of when it needs to be spent. So we'll just have to keep an eye on that.
We'll keep an eye on that, Director. Keep an eye on it, will you?
So what is the window that by which time does it have to be spent? Sorry, we'll be here another 2 hours.
Super. Yes, it needs to be spent before the end of 2028.
2028. Perfect. That's great. Thank you very much.
Good.
Tax and spend, tax and spend. I'll write a song. Okay, well, I guess that brings us, like I say, to the end of this budget cycle for the ASC. I would say that we have so much good discussion at this. It's amazing that we should do it twice a year.
I wanted, if I can, Mr. Chair, I didn't hear a seconder for that motion. I do want to really express appreciation to the directors for the second full day of the EASC budget presentations. This brings us to the end of the formal financial plan presentations. We do have a couple of follow-ups still to come to future EASC committee commissions. So certainly not done yet, but I also want to extend a big appreciation to the finance staff for all of the heavy lifting in pulling this material together and being so responsive with the information and tons of improvement over the past several years to this point where we're presenting this today. And also I'd be remiss to not thank the budget managers, the non-finance staff who have been contributing to the work with the finance staff, but also presenting in front of you for the last couple of weeks. It's a real chance to, I think, showcase some of the work that is happening in the various areas. You don't see these staff all the time, but it's a chance to showcase their work and show off some of the good work that's happening. So big appreciation to the budget managers.
I think we didn't, I think we roused them just the appropriate amount. Just a little bit, but no, we definitely.
I'll get back to you on that and find out whether it was
I think we certainly appreciate our staff in general and all the work they do, so. And I would remind everybody that Friday's Valentine's Day.